A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support.
It was a balmy Wednesday evening when I found myself staring into my half-empty glass of cheap wine, the dim light of the bar casting flickering shadows across the rippling surface. The muffled laughter and chatter around me felt distant, like I was observing life through a foggy window. It was the kind of place where secrets were whispered, and hearts were unknowingly shattered, and I was about to turn that heartbreak into something far more sinister. I had been nursing my own wounds for the past 4 months since he, Liam, walked out of my life with a smirk and a trail of lies. The memory still stung like the cheap wine burning my throat. He had been my whole world, the charming smile that could light up a room and the tender touch that made me forget all my worries. But all of that faded the moment I discovered messages on his phone, revealing a betrayal I never saw coming. For months, he had been seeing someone else, a girl he claimed was just a friend while I had believed in our fairy tale. And just like that, our love story crumbled. I felt like a ghost in my own life, wandering through familiar spaces but feeling utterly lost. My friends tried to console me, offering sympathy and the usual platitudes. But I wasn't looking for sympathy, I wanted justice. I wanted him to feel the sting of betrayal, to understand the devastation he'd inflicted on me. Then, there was Sarah. She was stunning, confident, playful, and unapologetically herself. We met at a mutual friend's party, where she effortlessly drew people in with her laughter. But what caught my eye was how she seemed to thrive on the attention of both men and women. The way she embraced her bisexuality was as refreshing as a summer breeze, and in that moment, a dark plan began to hatch in my mind. As I sat in that bar, swirling the remnants of my drink, the air crackling with a mixture of anticipation and dread, I found myself concocting a web of deception. I wasn't just going to sit back and let Liam have his happily ever after with his new girlfriend. I could almost taste the sweet satisfaction of revenge, chilling and exhilarating all at once. I needed to lure him into a situation that would unravel everything he thought he had built. But what I was planning was dangerous, both to him and to my own heart. The line between revenge and self-destruction was blurred, and I could feel the weight of my choices settling heavily on my shoulders. I had no idea how far I was willing to go, but deep down, I knew that this was just the beginning. The pieces were falling into place, and soon enough, I would turn the tables in a way he could never have imagined. Little did I know, revenge is a double-edged sword. And as I sat there, plotting my next move, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that the aftermath might be more explosive than I had ever anticipated. As the night wore on and the bar began to empty, I replayed the moment I discovered Liam's betrayal over and over in my mind. The cold, hard reality of it still felt surreal. I had been slumped on our couch, scrolling aimlessly through social media when a notification from his phone lit up the darkened room, an innocuous ding that shattered my world. It was a message from her, a girl I didn't even know existed. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you, babe," red heart emoji. That single line pierced through the cozy cocoon of our life together. I remember standing frozen, my heart racing as confusion morphed into disbelief. Liam had come home just minutes later, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I had forced a smile, pretending nothing was wrong while my mind spiraled deeper into suspicion. Each tick of the clock felt like a ticking time bomb, counting down to a confrontation I dreaded yet craved. When I finally confronted him, I sought an explanation, but all I got were half-hearted excuses wrapped in lies. "She's just a friend, babe. You know how I am with my friends." The warmth of his words felt like ice on my skin. I wanted to believe him, I had invested so much of myself into this relationship. The moments we shared played in my mind like a reel of a movie I thought would never end, until that moment shattered it all. I watched as he continued to weave these elaborate stories, his charming smile faltering under the weight of my disbelief. How could he look me in the eyes, the same eyes that once promised me the world, and lie so easily? My stomach churned with a mix of anger and sorrow, and I could feel the tears pricking at my eyelids as I fought to maintain my composure. And when the truth came crashing down, when I found out she wasn't just a friend but someone he had been seeing for months, the betrayal felt like a sucker punch to my gut. I had never felt so small and insignificant in my life. Each revelation pulled me deeper into a pit of despair, transforming me from a hopeful romantic to a woman scorned. The laughter we had shared, the plans we had made, they all morphed into reminders of the lies that had wrapped around our love like vines, choking its life out. As days turned into weeks, that initial pain began to crystallize into something else, an insatiable desire for revenge. I began replaying our time together, assessing every moment I thought was genuine, every laugh shared that now felt like a cruel joke. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been a mere character in his story, one that he could toss aside when he found a new muse. And then Sarah entered my life like a ray of sunshine cutting through the storm clouds of my heartbreak. She was everything Liam wasn't: vibrant, open, and unapologetically herself. I couldn't help but admire her confidence, the way she navigated life on her own terms. Our friendship blossomed quickly. I confided in her about my heartbreak, and she listened with genuine empathy, reminding me that I was more than the heartbreak that threatened to consume me. But soon, something darker began to take root within me. I saw Sarah's charm and beauty as a weapon, a tool I could wield to bring down the very foundation of Liam's new relationship. I fucking hated him for what he had done to me, and yet, there was a twisted thrill in imagining how effortlessly he'd fall for someone like Sarah. He wouldn't suspect a thing. The more I thought about it, the more it consumed me. Every interaction with Sarah became a rehearsal for the part I had decided to play in this sickening drama. I began to mastermind a plan that would ensnare Liam in a web of his own making. I convinced Sarah to flirt with him when I knew they'd be at the same party, just a few casual texts exchanged between us. I hid my intentions behind laughter and friendship, but the truth was that each moment of their budding connection felt like a small victory. But the thrill of the chase soon soured. I felt a strange heaviness in my chest, an uneasy tension that loomed over me like a thunderstorm waiting to break. The closer I got to executing my plan, the more I began to lose sight of myself. The girl who was once overflowing with optimism felt like a distant memory, replaced by a vengeful specter, prowling in the shadows of my mind. My friends started to notice my change. They'd ask if I was okay, if I needed to talk, but I brushed them aside. I couldn't let anyone in. I couldn't risk them seeing the darkness consuming me. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between two mutual friends at a cafe. They were discussing Liam's new girlfriend and laughing about how perfect they seemed together. Each word felt like a dagger to my heart. I wanted to scream that he didn't deserve happiness, that he was nothing but a fraud. But instead, I sat there in silence, stirring my cold coffee, feeling smaller and more invisible with every passing moment. With each laugh that erupted from their table, I felt the walls I had built around my heart close in tighter, suffocating me. This was when isolation became my only companion. The few hours I spent with Sarah turned into days where I meticulously planned every interaction with Liam, yet the guilt gnawed at my insides like a feral animal. I had once dreamed of happiness for myself, and yet here I was, seeking solace in the misfortune of others. When I lay awake at night, the cruelty of my thoughts echoed in the dark corners of my mind. I was spiraling, no longer able to distinguish between right and wrong. I had sought revenge as a means of healing, but instead, I was deepening my wounds. And then came the moment that shook me to my core. One night, I walked into a bar, my bar, where I had once felt comfortable and carefree. I was supposed to meet Sarah, but as I crossed the threshold, I froze. There, in the dim light, stood Liam, laughing with friends, his new girlfriend nestled comfortably by his side, her arms draped around his shoulders. The air in the room thickened, and my heart raced with anger and humiliation. I felt the walls close in, the laughter ringing hollow as it echoed in my ears. Desperately, I forced myself to look away, but it was too late. The sight of him, his carefree laughter, the way he brushed his fingers against her cheek, made my insides churn. I felt sick as rage boiled beneath the surface, a feral instinct barely contained. As Sarah entered moments later, I flew into a nervous panic, wanting to pull her aside and relay my plan, desperate for her participation in my revenge. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern lining her face as she noticed my distress. I plastered on a smile, fighting against the tightness in my chest. "Just feeling a bit under the weather," I lied, my voice cracking slightly. But the truth was, I was unraveling. I had lost perspective on what this revenge meant, and I could feel the weight of my actions hanging heavily over my conscience. As I tried to engage in casual conversation with Sarah, my thoughts kept drifting back to Liam. The laughter, the tenderness he displayed towards her, my heart sank under the reality that he was truly moving on, while I was still tethered to the ghost of our shattered relationship. Then, in that moment of self-imposed isolation, I caught a glimpse of his eyes. They were bright, alive, filled with a warmth I had once basked in and now envied from the shadows. A stark realization hit me: I was willing to jeopardize not only my happiness but also the innocent lives caught in my web of revenge. I was transforming into everything I had despised about Liam, a puppet master, manipulating feelings like they were mere toys. I turned to Sarah, forcing a laugh, but it felt hollow against the backdrop of my shattered peace. "Let's grab a drink," I suggested, eager to drown the guilt in another cheap glass of wine. But as I sipped, my heart raced, my fingers twitching with pent-up rage. I wanted to scream at Liam, confront him with the truth of his betrayal, but the weight of my calculated malice kept me silent. Then came the moment that shattered the fog of vengeance and plunged me into stark clarity. In the chaotic joy surrounding me, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, Sarah pulled me aside under the soft glow of the fairy lights strung across the ceiling. "You haven't been yourself lately," she said gently, her eyes searching mine. "Talk to me. What's really going on?" At that moment, it felt as though the walls of my carefully constructed facade crumbled. I stood there, staring into her genuine concern, and a wave of remorse washed over me. How could I keep dragging Sarah into this twisted game? How could I continue using someone who had only shown me kindness and support? That's when the final straw snapped. I caught Liam's laughter again, this time a cold realization settling in my gut like ice. It wasn't just a matter of revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming myself, taking back my narrative rather than letting Liam dictate the terms of my existence. His presence, the way it evoked so much pain, reminded me that my happiness shouldn't be contingent on his suffering. I could let go of the vengeance, the toxic need to see him hurt, and instead, I could focus on healing, truly healing, for myself. In that moment, surrounded by the clamor of the bar and the flickering lights, clarity struck like lightning illuminating a night sky. The weight of my plans fell away, replaced by a desperate need to reclaim my identity. I had spent too long defining myself through the lens of his betrayal, and every expensive drink I indulged in was just a hollow distraction. As I stood there, I made a silent promise to myself: I would not go through with my plan. I wanted to tell Sarah everything, to confess how I had almost dragged her into my twisted scheme. But the words caught in my throat, unsure of how to bridge this chasm I had created between revenge and justice, between anger and healing. Instead, I forced a smile and looked Sarah in the eyes. "Let's get out of here," I said, suddenly desperate for fresh air, for the light of day to wash over the shadows of my intentions. "I just need a moment." As we stepped outside into the crisp night air, I exhaled deeply, a mix of relief and regret swirling within me. I finally understood that revenge may offer fleeting satisfaction, but it would never fill the void that Liam had created in my heart. I had to build my own happiness, one not reliant on tearing down others. But before that moment of clarity could wash over me completely, the bitter taste of revenge still lingered in the back of my mind. It was a taste I wasn't quite ready to give up, a shadow that haunted me. So I decided to outline my revenge plan in vivid detail. If I was going to pivot from revenge being my focus to reclaiming my own power, I needed to ensure that this plan would still play out, but not for my sake, rather, for my empowerment. The revenge plan, step by step 1. Establish communication with Sarah. I would confide in Sarah about my original intentions concerning Liam, explaining my emotional turmoil. This would not only strengthen our bond but also gain her perspective on the situation. It was crucial that she understood my motivations were rooted in heartbreak, not malice. 2. Create a casual encounter. I would arrange a casual hangout where I could accidentally run into Liam. I knew that he frequented a local coffee shop on weekends, so I planned a spontaneous brunch with Sarah there. I would make sure to look my best, something that would remind Liam of what he lost. 3. Plant the seed of interest. This part was the most delicate. I would enlist Sarah's help to subtly flirt with Liam. She was naturally charming, and her presence would be magnetic enough to draw him in. A playful touch on his arm, a bright smile, and laughter would go a long way. All the while, I would pretend to be invested in a conversation with another friend, conveniently allowing them to connect without my direct interference. 4. Craft a scenario of intimacy. I would orchestrate an opportunity for them to coincidentally end up at the same party later that week. I had a friend who was hosting an event and could easily add Sarah and Liam to the guest list. I'd casually mention to Liam that Sarah would be there, planting the idea in his mind. That way, he would subconsciously associate her with fun and excitement, something he had clearly been missing in our relationship. 5. Monitor their progress. I intended to keep tabs on their interactions without being obvious. I would subtly ask Sarah to share details of her conversations with Liam. I wanted to know how he responded to her and how quickly he fell for her charm. This was a web I was spinning, and every thread had to be woven carefully. 6. Intermediate friend involvement. I would plant seeds of doubt about Liam in Sarah's mind, framing him as the classic bad boy who toyed with hearts. I'd share my past experiences, emphasizing how he had treated me poorly. This would not only validate my feelings but also ensure Sarah had a guarded approach, just enough to keep her intrigued while also questioning his genuine intentions. 7. Revelation and confrontation. As their connection deepened, I would prepare a dramatic revelation of my own. I could reveal to Sarah the full extent of Liam's betrayal to both me and her, making it clear that he was not a man worth investing in. I would choose a moment when she seemed particularly smitten. Seeing the disappointment and hurt wash over her face would be both bittersweet and satisfying. 8. Final touches. At the climax of this plan, I envisioned a confrontation between Liam and me. Ideally, I would appear in a setting where the tension was palpable, the party where Sarah would be showcasing a flirtation with Liam, all while I was poised in the shadows. As the evening approached, I felt the electric buzz of anticipation coursing through my veins. My heart raced. I could taste the bittersweet satisfaction of what I was about to orchestrate. The air was thick with suspense, like the calm before a storm. The party was a kaleidoscope of laughter and colorful lights, friends gathered in clusters, and the hum of conversation swirling around me like a dance. I stepped inside, my nerves thrumming with adrenaline. I wasn't here to relive the past, but rather to reclaim my narrative. I caught sight of Sarah first, sparkling in a fitted dress that clung to her curves. The way she moved, her laugh ringing out like a chime, was intoxicating, irresistibly vibrant. I smiled as I watched her greet Liam, who was perched comfortably against the wall, surrounded by a group of friends. "Remember, just be yourself," I whispered to Sarah, my voice a mix of encouragement and bait. She nodded with a determined grin, and in that moment, I felt an almost predatory glee. As the night unfolded, the tension between Liam and Sarah crackled like static electricity. I watched from a distance, blending into the lively crowd, my heart pounding like a drum, every beat syncing with the unfolding drama. Liam was drawn to her, like a moth to a flame. Their chemistry was undeniable, that magnetic pull weaving an intricate tapestry of flirtation under the dim lights. When their eyes locked, I felt a pang of bittersweet triumph. I leaned against the bar, swirling my drink as I observed him lean closer to her, laughter spilling into the space between them. "You're really fun, you know that," he said, a charming smirk dancing on his lips. My pulse quickened. This was it. And then the moment arrived. Sarah laughed brightly, her hand brushing against his arm. "You're not so bad yourself, Liam. I've heard stories about you, though." I felt the adrenaline spike within me, a dark thrill coursing through my veins. I had planted the seeds of doubt, and now they were sprouting. I saw Liam's smirk falter for a moment, confusion flickering in his eyes. He shrugged it off, playful banter resuming as I inched closer, my heart pounding in my ears. "Is it true you broke a girl's heart not too long ago?" Sarah teased, her eyes glinting with mischief. My breath hitched. The atmosphere felt thick with tension as I watched him tense up, his facade momentarily slipping. Perhaps for the first time, he understood that his charming mask was slowly cracking. "Who said that?" Liam replied, attempting to deflect, but I could see the sweat gathering just above his brow, a telltale sign of the mounting pressure. "Just rumors," she replied, her voice light, but I could see the challenge in her gaze, the way she dared him to reveal more. I savored the moment, a simmering revenge cloaked beneath the guise of a casual conversation. Suddenly, I stepped into view, forcing a smile that felt dangerously practiced. "Hey, Liam!" My voice sliced through their moment. His eyes snapped to me, the color draining from his face as the realization of my presence set in. "YN," he stammered, glancing between Sarah and me, a look of panic flashing across his face. "Oh, don't mind me. Just thought I'd pop in and watch the show," I said, letting my words hang in the air with a mocking lilt. The subtle tension of the room morphed into something palpable, a charged atmosphere swirling with uncertainty. I enjoyed the way Liam's complexion shifted, how his carefree demeanor faltered in the face of looming confrontation. "YN, it's good to see you," he managed, attempting to regain his composure. But I could see his mind racing, calculating how to navigate this unexpected twist. The thrill of revenge spiraled within me, awakening a long-dormant strength. "We were just talking about you, actually," Sarah chimed in, her voice light but laced with an edge. "Liam was telling me how great a boyfriend he is." "Or was?" The playful smile on her lips belied the deeper undercurrent of mockery beneath. I could tell she was enjoying this as much as I was. "What brings you here?" Liam asked, his voice shaky, but I could sense the bravado, attempting to surface. I could see the gears turning in his mind. This was now a game of survival for his already tarnished reputation. "I wanted to see how you're doing," I replied, feigning concern as I moved closer, the space between us charged with unspoken history. "Heard you found someone special," I added, gesturing towards Sarah with a playful wink. "Lucky girl." The laughter around us felt like distant echoes, but my heart drummed loudly in my chest, reverberating with potential outcomes. I was both terrified and exhilarated. "Oh, we're just friends," Liam stammered, his eyes darting between us as he sought an escape. I relished the discomfort I saw flash across his face, the panic of someone cornered. "Friends who seem to be enjoying each other's company," I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You haven't changed, have you? Always charming, but never really loyal." Every word felt like a dagger, slicing through the layers of pretense he had carefully constructed. The room froze, laughter muffled as all eyes turned toward us, the atmosphere electrified with suspense. I could sense the collective breath holding, waiting for Liam's next move. "YN, this isn't," he began, but I cut him off, the satisfaction of seeing him squirm was intoxicating. "No, it's exactly what it is. It's time you face the truth, Liam. You walk around like you're untouchable, leaving a trail of broken hearts behind you, and you think you'll get away with it? My tone was sharp, each word wrapped in the weight of my pain. You don't know anything about me, he shot back, but the confidence in his voice wavered. I could see the cracks, the realization settling in that his charm was no longer working on me, that the grip he once had on our shared history was slipping. I know enough, I replied, taking a step closer, letting the tension rise. Sarah deserves better than an egocentric player who thinks love is merely a game. My gaze locked onto Sarah's, silently conveying my support, and I felt the rush of camaraderie in that moment. With that, the facade fell apart, and I reveled in the chaos I had orchestrated. I could see the shock in Liam's eyes as they flickered between disbelief and rage, but I didn't care. I had taken back control, and the weight of my own pain had transformed into something powerful. The party erupted into murmurs, the whispers swirling like a tempest around.
I still remember that day in vivid detail, the way the sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on the wooden floor of my tiny apartment in Seattle. I leaned against the cool granite of my kitchen counter, clutching my phone like it was a lifeline, my heart racing as if it had just sprinted a marathon. I was supposed to feel excitement, relief, maybe even joy. Instead, I felt a knot tightening in my stomach, a dread I couldn't quite shake. It was late August, the air still thick with summer humidity, but inside, a storm was brewing. My name is Claire, and what I thought would be a turning point in my life, a savvy investment in a small tech startup, had turned into a nightmare. I was a 32-year-old marketing manager, with dreams of financial independence and a cabin in the woods, away from the grind of city life. I had spent nearly 2 years saving up, poring over spreadsheets and market trends, convinced I had found the golden opportunity. The company, let's call them Tech Vision, started with a flicker of hope. I met their charismatic CEO, Max, at an industry conference. His pitch was electric, and I was entranced by his charm. He painted a picture of innovation, of changing the world and making a fortune while doing it. I can still hear his smooth voice, the way he made everything sound so easy. My friends, Hannah and Ben, urged me to take the plunge. After all, investing in the future of technology was what everyone was talking about. But now, here I stood, the reality of my choice crashing down around me like a wave, each moment filled with the acrid taste of betrayal. I was staring at the bank statement that felt more like a dagger than a document. Nearly $200,000, my dreams, my plans, my future, vanished into thin air. The glossy brochure I had kept pinned to my fridge began to feel more like a cruel joke than a promise of prosperity. The worst part? Ignoring the gnawing voice in the back of my mind that whispered, "What if this isn't real?" That voice had kept me awake at night, but I silenced it with logic, with hope. Now, I wished I had listened. Max and his team were unreachable, their website vanished, their numbers disconnected. Gone like a ghost, leaving behind nothing but shadows of my shattered trust. As I paced the floor, desperation clawed at me, twisting into something darker. I could feel resentment bubbling beneath the surface, a fire igniting, a thirst for justice that morphed into something more sinister. I wasn't just angry, I was driven. What had started as an innocent venture had transformed into a battle cry. I knew I had to take action. I wouldn't let them walk away scot-free. I needed help, but more than that, I needed a plan. So, here I am, pen trembling, navigating the thin line between right and wrong, poised to turn this pain into something powerful. The clock ticked ominously in the background, a constant reminder that time was running out. I was ready to take back what was mine, I was ready to fight. And as I prepared to unleash the storm that was brewing within me, I had to wonder just how far I was willing to go. The betrayal unfolded slowly, like a flower blooming only to reveal the thorns hidden beneath its petals. At first, I couldn't comprehend the full magnitude of what had happened. Each day since the investment had been a blur of denial and disbelief. I replayed the moments over and over in my mind, every conversation with Max, every assurance that this was the path to fortune. I should have sensed the danger lurking behind his polished smile. The first inkling that something was off came just a week after I wired the money. I had received an email from Tech Vision, a casual update that promised exciting developments. "Things are moving quickly," it said, "we're preparing for our first big launch and investors are going to be thrilled." I felt a flutter of hope in my chest, but with every passing day, the thrill was overtaken by a gnawing anxiety. The follow-up emails grew fewer, the updates less frequent. I remember staring at my screen, waiting for a response to my increasingly frantic inquiries, each unanswered email a dagger to my faith in them. What is going on? I whispered to myself, optimism waning as confusion took its place. Had I really just watched my hard-earned money disappear? How could I have been so naive? I thought of Max, his confident demeanor, and the way he spoke of integrity and innovation. I had trusted him. Slowly, that trust twisted into something darker, a bitter taste in my mouth whenever I thought of him. Then came the day I decided to do some digging. I spent hours on the internet, pulling at every thread I could find about Tech Vision. As I sifted through forums and financial records, reality hit me harder than a freight train. The company had a history of scams. My heart sank deeper as I read the stories of others like me, caught in the web of false promises and shattered dreams. Each story mirrored mine, each name echoing my own foolishness. I felt sick, like I had swallowed poison. How could I have been so blind? Anger surged through me like a tidal wave, drowning out any trace of pity. I was furious, not just at them, but at myself. I had let hope blind me to the truth, and now that hope had turned to ashes. Night after night, I lay in bed, the ceiling spinning above me as I wrestled with my thoughts. I pictured Max's face, his charming smile morphing into a sneer. You think you can just take my money and run? I seethed, clenching my fists as I stared into the darkness. And then it happened. One night, fueled by rage and a sense of betrayal so profound it felt like a living thing within me, I began crafting my plan. I focused on the faces of everyone who had wronged me, not just Max, but the entire Tech Vision team. They were out there, living their lives while I grappled with my shattered dreams. No way in hell would I let them get away with this. But the more I plotted, the more I felt the duality of my emotions, the delicate balance between seeking justice and the intoxicating allure of revenge. I was scared of what I might become. Would I lose myself in this pursuit? Would I cross a line I could never uncross? Yet the thought of standing back and doing nothing felt worse, like a slow suffocation. Time passed, and as the days turned into weeks, I became a shell of my former self, consumed by the desire for retribution. I stopped answering calls from friends, stopped engaging in the joys of life I once relished. Instead, my nights were filled with the sound of furious typing, late-night forums, and meticulous research, each click of my keyboard echoing like a gunshot in an empty room. It was just me and the growing pit of despair turning into a raging inferno of vengeance. The screen illuminated my face with a sickly glow, casting shadows of guilt and obsession. The isolation was crushing. Hannah, my closest friend, started checking in on me more often. "Are you okay?" She would text, her concern palpable through the screen. But how could I explain the turmoil brewing inside? Each time I saw her name flash on my phone, it felt like another reminder of the life I was losing. I could hear her voice, "We just want you to be happy, Claire." But to them, I was just being overly dramatic, a victim of my own ambition. They didn't understand the depths of my despair, the humiliation of being scammed, the shame of feeling foolish. I pulled away from them, retreating further into my shell of anger. Things escalated when, out of desperation, I reached out to other victims I had stumbled across in my research. I found a Facebook group dedicated to holding Tech Vision accountable. At first, it felt like a lifeline, a glimmer of hope in my darkest hour. But the deeper I delved, the more I realized how widespread the deception truly was. I wasn't alone. The group was filled with people from all walks of life, each with their own anguished stories of hardship. It should have made me feel less isolated, but instead, it only deepened my sense of betrayal. There were parents who had drained their savings, retirees who had risked it all, young professionals like me. Every story was a mirror reflecting my own pain. But with this newfound connection came an overwhelming wave of despair. The stories grew darker, revealing the extent of the company's deceit. One woman, Julie, recounted how she had taken out loans to invest, convinced that her family's future depended on this one bold move. I could hear the shake in her voice as she relayed the moment she realized Tech Vision had vanished, leaving her in crippling debt. "I didn't just lose money, I lost my future," she cried. As I listened, I felt a piece of my heart shatter for her, and I was terrified of becoming her. It was during one of these late-night video calls with the group that I first heard talk of taking action. Someone suggested reaching out to the media to expose Tech Vision for the fraud they truly were. My heart raced at the prospect. This was it, this could be my moment to strike back, to shine a light on their lies. But just as I was feeling empowered, a harsh reminder of my reality crashed down on me. That same week, I received a phone call I dreaded. It was my bank, the one I had trusted with my life's savings. They had noticed unusual activity on my account and wanted to discuss it, probing politely but firmly. The weight of shame and disbelief crashed over me like a tidal wave. Had they figured out my investment was a scam? Did they think I was complicit in some sort of financial misconduct? My palms were sweaty as I sat in the cold rush of panic, unable to articulate the truth. "There's been a mistake," I stammered, my voice trembling. I felt so small, so exposed. I could almost hear the judgment in their voice as they told me they would need to escalate the matter further. That was the moment it hit me, I was losing control of everything. My finances, my future, my reputation. I had been walking on a tightrope of despair and uncertainty, but now I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. The final straw, utterly crushing, yet igniting a fire within me, was the realization that I was not just a victim of a scam, I was a pawn in a game I never chose to play. This wasn't just about money anymore, this was about reclaiming my dignity, my power, my life. The phone call rattled me deeply. I hung up, my heart pounding in my chest, and the suffocating weight of embarrassment settled heavily on my shoulders. For weeks, I had been stewing in silence, pretending that all was well while my world crumbled around me. But now, here I was, standing at a crossroads where I could either succumb to the weight of my humiliation or rise from the ashes of my shame and fight back. I collapsed onto my couch, my breath quickening as I thought of everything I had lost. Not just the money, though that stung like a fresh wound, but also the trust I once had in myself. I had allowed hope to occupy the space where caution should have thrived. Each day this scamming company eluded justice felt like a personal affront, and each story of another victim echoed my own. I could almost hear their voices melding into one unified chant: "We were wronged. We deserve justice." As I sat there, the realization dawned on me that I wasn't just some passive bystander in this narrative, I could be the architect of my own story. This was my moment to turn despair into action. I took a deep breath and pulled out my laptop, the cool metal grounding me in reality. I could feel the crackling energy of determination wrapping around me like a cloak. I had spent too long consumed by my thoughts, and it was time to channel that energy into something constructive. I began typing furiously, assembling every detail of my experience, the promises made, the assurances given, the details that had lured me into their carefully woven trap. I would document everything, not just for myself, but to expose them to the world. But I needed more than just my own voice. I needed allies. I turned back to the Facebook group, my fingers racing over the keys as I penned a message calling for an urgent meeting. We need to unite our stories. We can't let them get away with this. I hit send, each click feeling like a battle cry reverberating off the walls of my despair. As I waited for responses, the seconds felt like hours. Anxiety gnawed at my stomach, but I refused to back down. I envisioned Max's face, his smug smile as he counted his ill-gotten gains. Rage bubbled within me, and I could hear the voices of all the victims, the mothers, the fathers, the retirees, rallying behind a shared purpose. I wasn't alone anymore, I had a team, albeit a virtual one, and together we could be a force stronger than any one of us alone. Finally, the notifications began to ping, each one a spark igniting the kindling of defiance within me. Victims poured in with their stories, each one more tragic than the last. A mother whose family home was at stake, a college student who had risked everything on a dream. Together, we formed a coalition of the wronged, and the account of our collective misery began to take shape. That week, we gathered virtually, voices and faces emanating from screens, united in our grief and our righteousness. I felt the electric energy of our anger coalesce into a charge of determination. We can't. As the days turned into weeks, our coalition grew stronger. Each member brought unique strengths to the table. Some had legal backgrounds, others were social media savants, and a few were experienced investors who understood the intricacies of finance far better than I did. Together, we formed a battle plan that promised an electrifying revenge on TechVision and their deceitful CEO, Max. Here's how we intended to execute our revenge step by step. Our first course of action was simple yet essential: document every interaction and transaction we had with TechVision. Everyone shared their emails, recorded calls, and any promotional materials they'd received. As individuals, we were strong, but together we formed a formidable archive of evidence that every investor had been misled. I took the lead in organizing this, creating a shared Google Drive folder filled with documents, screenshots, and testimonies, our collective tale of betrayal. Once we had amassed enough documentation, we sought out a legal expert specializing in fraud cases. We pooled our resources to hire a reputable lawyer who had experience with class action lawsuits. This was crucial because we all understood that taking down a company like TechVision wouldn't just be a matter of angry emails, it required a strategic and lawful approach. While our legal battle was building momentum, we simultaneously turned our attention to the media. I drafted a compelling press release detailing our stories and the flagrant deceit behind TechVision. With the help of our social media expert, we crafted a campaign that would grab headlines. We wanted to create a buzz around our plight, knowing that media exposure could lead to greater scrutiny of TechVision. We contacted various news outlets, local Seattle stations, and even national blogs dedicated to financial scams. I felt a surge of power each time I hit send on an email, knowing that I was taking the fight directly to the public. Armed with our stories and evidence, we launched a social media blitz. We created a dedicated hashtag #ExposeTechVision, and encouraged our allies to share their experiences online. Each tweet, each post, each share became a brick in our fortress of awareness, drawing attention from other victims and financial watchdogs. As the shares multiplied, I could feel the anticipation building within me. It was thrilling to see our collective voice amplify. I imagined Max, somewhere in his lavish office, monitoring the unfolding storm of outrage that we were creating. Fueled by the momentum we had built, we organized a public protest outside the TechVision office. We designed bold signs that read "Don't trust TechVision" and "Justice for investors." The idea was to raise awareness about the scam and draw attention from potential investors who might still be in the dark. This was a pivotal point in our plan. The public protest was not just about making noise, it was about reclaiming our power and standing united against the tyranny of deception. I envisioned the sea of faces, all of us rising in solidarity, demanding accountability. Recognizing the need for a stronger voice, we reached out to victim advocacy groups and consumer protection organizations. We learned about others who had suffered due to TechVision's fraudulent activities, and we invited them to join our movement. This not only bolstered our numbers but added credibility to our cause. With our lawyer in place and ample evidence gathered, we filed a class action lawsuit the day of the protest arrived, heavy with the weight of anticipation. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the bustling streets of Seattle. I stood at the forefront, flanked by dozens of other victims, each of us holding signs in trembling hands. Heartbeats drummed in unison, each pulse echoing my own anxiety. This was it. As we marched toward the TechVision office, I could feel adrenaline coursing through my veins. The streets buzzed with energy. Faces turned to us, eyebrows raised, whispers rippling like the wind. I could taste the electricity in the air, a potent mix of fear and hope. Fear of repercussions, hope for justice. Justice for investors. We chanted, our voices ringing out like a battle cry. Each repetition of that phrase felt like a hammer striking a nail, a declaration that we would not be silenced. I couldn't help but scan the crowd for Max. My heart thudded painfully against my chest, a blend of rage and excitement swelling within me. Would he show his face? Would he see how many lives he had disrupted? As we reached the entrance of TechVision's sleek glass building, I noticed a few employees peering out, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern. I felt a surge of satisfaction as I imagined the discomfort they must be feeling, knowing they were part of a sinking ship. One of them pointed at us, a flicker of panic dancing in their eyes. Good. They should be scared. The protest grew louder, voices merging into a wave of anger and frustration. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. It was time to take the plunge into the abyss of confrontation. With a nod from the leader of our coalition, I stepped forward, gripping a megaphone tightly like a lifeline. Today, we stand not just for ourselves, but for every single soul who has lost their dreams, their savings, their trust, I shouted, my voice echoing through the air. Tech vision has robbed us of our future, but we are here to reclaim our power. The crowd erupted in cheers, a roar so fierce it sent shivers down my spine. This was the moment I had been waiting for, a reckoning that was long overdue. I could see the faces of those around me, the anger, the determination, the hope, a tapestry of raw emotion. This was about more than just money, it was about dignity, about standing up against the cruelty of deception. Suddenly, I spotted him. Max stood at the entrance, flanked by 2 security guards, his face pale and drawn. His confident air had crumbled, replaced by an expression of disbelief. The man who had once charmed me with promises now looked cornered, a trapped animal in the face of undeniable truth. The crowd's energy shifted, a collective gasp rippling through us like a shockwave. Max, I shouted, pointing directly at him, the word cutting through the air like a blade. You think you can just take our money and disappear? We will not let you hide behind your lies. His eyes widened, disbelief morphing into something deeper, a flicker of fear. I could see the wheels turning in his head, the realization dawning that he was no longer the puppeteer. The strings had snapped, and he was now at the mercy of the very people he had scammed. The crowd surged forward, inching towards him, and I felt a primal instinct ignite within me. This wasn't just about exposing him, it was about reclaiming the narrative. I stepped closer, a fire blazing in my chest. The protest was a catalyst, a moment that splintered my reality into a before and after. We had made headlines, our stories cascading across news outlets like a tidal wave. Victims turned advocates, we had transformed our pain into a weapon against those who had wronged us. But amidst the chaos, the euphoria of the moment was soon overshadowed by a harsh reality. In the days that followed, the adrenaline faded, leaving behind a heavy ache in my chest. The aftermath of the protest was a whirlwind of emotions, triumph mingled with uncertainty. Though we had drawn significant attention to tech vision and its fraudulent practices, we were still fighting an uphill battle. I began to see the complexities of taking on a company that had seemingly vanished into thin air, like smoke blowing in the wind. A few days after the protest, I stood at my window, staring at the Seattle skyline. The city seemed to mock me with its glimmering beauty, while I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I had put all my energy into fighting for our cause, but what did it really mean for me? The thrill of the protest had given way to the sobering reality that my financial losses were still there, a nagging reminder of my vulnerability. As I sipped my morning coffee, my phone buzzed relentlessly, a mix of notifications and messages from fellow victims. They were hopeful, buoyed by the publicity we had garnered. We're gaining traction. They wrote, ecstatic about a potential interview with a well-known news anchor who wanted to discuss our stories. I felt the flicker of hope they carried, but it was tinged with a deep-seated fear of vulnerability that still haunted me. Was I really ready to open up about my darkest moments to the world? Then, the media coverage hit a tipping point. An investigative news team picked up our story and began delving into the web of deception spun by tech vision. They uncovered other victims who had come forward, some who had even lost their life savings. I watched as the stories unfolded on the evening news, each segment stacking on top of the last like a tower of strength. Despite the darkness of each tale, it was hard not to feel a surge of pride, each voice, each heartbreak becoming part of a greater narrative that demanded justice. But the emotional toll was immense. My own story felt laid bare for all to see, and I grappled with an unsettling mixture of vulnerability and bravery. The feelings of shame and humiliation resurfaced, pulling me under like a riptide, dragging me back to that moment when I had unwittingly handed over my dreams. Each time a new victim's story aired, I felt both kinship and despair. These were lives disrupted because of our naive faith in a false promise. Through it all, I kept in close contact with Hannah and Ben, who had initially urged me to invest. I could feel the weight of their concern and guilt, but to be honest, I was angry with them. They had believed in Tech Vision, and in a way, they had believed in me. It felt like betrayal mixed with love, a complicated mess of emotions that bore heavily on our friendships. One night, over a tense dinner, I decided to confront them, my heart racing as I spoke the words I had bottled up for too long. You both believed in Tech Vision. You believed in Max. I need you to understand what that did to me. It was like I was drowning, and you didn't even notice. Hannah looked devastated, her cheeks flushed with guilt. Claire, we were wrong, and I'm so sorry. We never meant. I never thought I'd be here, pouring my heart out in the quiet solitude of my dimly lit living room, the remnants of my past flickering on the screen in front of me. It's the soft glow from my laptop that seems to draw out all the shadows lurking in the corners of my mind. The smell of burnt coffee clings to the air, my attempt at comfort, but it only stirs the bitter taste of what once was. It's funny, isn't it? How a single person can invade your life so deeply that even years later, they still have the power to pull the strings of your memory like a marionette moved by unseen hands. Let me take you back to that summer light, warm and inviting yet holding an undertone of something darker. I was 23, with freshly dyed auburn hair that glinted like the sun as I ran my fingers through it absent-mindedly. I had just moved to this bustling city, its pulse quickening with every honk and shout on the busy street below, the perfect backdrop for a new beginning. But it was then that I met Eric, our paths colliding like two meteors in a night sky. He was charming, with an easy smile and a laugh that could light up the darkest corners of my heart. For a while, everything felt perfect, tantalizingly sweet like the first sip of a summer lemonade. I remember the first time he whispered that he loved me, his breath warm against my ear, and how it felt like we were the only two people in the universe. But as the months rolled by, that intoxicating sweetness began to sour. Eric was the kind of guy who enjoyed chaos, a master of stirring the pot. Friends became mere pawns in his game, and I soon found myself caught in a whirlwind of jealousy and manipulation. I'd see him charming others, while I stood on the sidelines, feeling smaller with every smile he flashed at someone new. And then, after 2 years of emotional whiplash, we finally ended it, an inevitable explosion of hurt and words thrown like knives. I thought I would finally escape the chaos, the incessant drama that seemed to cling to him like a shadow. Little did I know, the remnants of our relationship would haunt me well into the years that followed. Even now, as I sit here, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, stirring the pot, crafting new tales that twist the truth into something unrecognizable. I thought I had moved on, but the reality of it all weighs heavily on my chest. I can't escape the tension that ripples through my life whenever I hear his name whispered in familiar circles, or when I see a mutual friend's post online, something casual that feels like a knife twisting in an old wound. I never wanted revenge, it was never in my plans. But as I map out the last few years in my head, I'm starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, it's the only way to reclaim my narrative. I can't let him roam free in my mind, planting seeds of doubt and chaos. I need a plan, and I need it to be clever, calculated, something that will finally put an end to his manipulations. Because we all know the truth, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And I believe Eric is still that same master puppeteer, playing games, and I'm ready to cut the strings. The conflict didn't surface all at once, it was more like a slow unraveling, a gutting of everything I thought I understood about our relationship. In the early days, Eric's charm was intoxicating, but soon it became a veil, hiding the chaos beneath. The small betrayals emerged like cracks in a once beautiful vase. I remember the first time I felt it, an oyster of doubt nestled in my stomach. We were at a party, surrounded by friends, laughter swirling around us like autumn leaves. I caught Eric's gaze lingering too long on another woman, her laughter drawing him in like a moth to a flame. I brushed it off, foolish jealousy, I told myself, but then I couldn't shake the feeling. Was it paranoia, or was there something to it? My nights grew restless, each tick of the clock amplifying my insecurities. Slowly, I began piecing together the small lies. An innocuous text he'd forgotten to delete. A change in his energy, like he was a stage actor slipping out of character. The way he'd tell stories about our adventures, embellishing them to seem more thrilling, as if he needed validation from others rather than me. Yet, every time I confronted him, he'd wrap me up in his words, his beguiling smile disarming my anger. "You know I only have eyes for you," he'd say, and I'd want to believe it. After all, love is blind, something I had learned the hard way. But the whispers grew louder, and soon enough, I couldn't ignore them. Friends began to pull away, their gazes heavy with unspoken truths. "Is something going on with Eric?" one of them asked cautiously one night, her brow furrowed with concern. It felt like a punch to the stomach. I remained silent, a mask of laughter plastered over my confusion. Yet, the truth was festering. I could sense it, he was painting me as the villain in his retelling of our story. I was the one who was too needy, the crazy one, while he was simply the misunderstood artist. The more I dug, the more it hurt. Then came the day of the final betrayal, the one that shattered the glass of my world. I stumbled upon his social media, a late-night scroll through the screen, and there it was, a picture of him, arms wrapped around another woman, laughter spilling from their lips, eyes sparkling with that same mischievous light he once reserved for me. The caption read, "Finding new adventures." My heart sank. I thought I was building a life with him, but this was a dagger to the heart. I had been right all along, hadn't I? The masquerade was over, the truth stripped bare, and there I was, left to grapple with the wreckage. My hands trembled as I replayed the moment over and over, trying to convince myself it was a cruel joke. But deep down, I knew it was real. Eric had moved on, and I was still trapped in the cage of our shared memories. The anger bubbled up, igniting a fire inside me that I had never felt before. How could he? Why would he twist the knife like this? Each betrayal thrummed through my veins, a reminder of the weeks I spent questioning my worth. I felt like the fool, duped by the very person who had promised me the universe. And there it was, the bitterness I had tried to ignore creeping up my throat. I wanted to scream, to confront him, to make him feel the same suffocating pain he had thrust upon me. But I couldn't just lash out, I needed to be strategic. The weeks turned into months, and I found myself falling deeper into an abyss of distrust. Friends I once confided in began to fade away, their silence heavy with judgment and the unspoken knowledge of his betrayals. Every time I reached for reassurance, all I got was pity, their eyes darting nervously as if I were the one with the problem. I felt like a pariah in my own life, suffocated by the weight of the world's expectations. The isolation gnawed at me, an incessant reminder that the bonds I thought were solid were little more than threads ready to snap. I couldn't turn to my friends because I was terrified they'd take his side or, worse, confirm the whispers I feared were true. I became a ghost in my own life, wandering through social gatherings, cloaked in forced smiles while the laughter felt like a distant echo. But then the humiliation hit an all-time low. It was a chance encounter that solidified my worst fears. I was at a coffee shop, scrolling mindlessly through my phone when I heard that unmistakable laugh, his laugh, coming from behind me. My stomach knotted, and my pulse quickened as I turned to see him sitting there, grinning with that same charm, and holding hands with the woman from the photo. A punch of betrayal surged through my chest. I wanted to vanish, to dissolve into the floorboards, but instead, I froze. It was as if time had paused just for me to witness my own degradation. They were sharing a moment that mirrored ours, soft gazes, playful nudges, and I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, a wave of anger mixed with a feeling of utter worthlessness. As I awkwardly gathered my things, I could feel their eyes on me, could sense the judgment cascading silently between them. I spilled my drink everywhere, the cold brew soaking the floor and my shoes, an accident, but in that moment, it felt like a symbol of my life upended. I mumbled an apology, my cheeks flushed with both embarrassment and fury, and rushed out before I could hear their laughter echoing in my mind. That day was the tipping point. I became paranoid and suspicious, watching as the remnants of our shared circle of friends began to dwindle to mere acquaintances. I heard snippets of conversations that felt like they were directed at me, whispers about my crazy ex and how I should just let it go. The words stung, a reminder that Eric was still casting his spell, warping the narrative to fit his needs. It felt like a cruel cosmic joke. I had once built a life and shared a vision of the future with this person, but now I was an outcast in my own story. The shame of being portrayed as the villain made it impossible to trust anyone. Even the people I once considered allies began to retreat, their glances heavy with pity or judgment, and I couldn't help but think they were taking Eric's side without even knowing the full story. I began to lose myself, feeling like a ghost in my own skin, haunted by echoes of laughter that felt long gone. Friends who once texted just to check in started fading out, leaving me stranded like driftwood in a sea of betrayal. The isolation crept deeper, wrapping around me like an anchor, dragging me down into a darkness I couldn't escape. But one night, while scrolling through old photos in a fit of nostalgia, I stumbled upon a video of Eric and me at a concert, the way his arm was wrapped around me, my laughter ringing out like a melody. We looked so happy, so in love. But as I watched, something shifted deep within me. That moment was long gone, and the person in that video felt like a stranger now. I could no longer ignore the gnawing need for closure, for an end to the chaos he had brought into my life. And then it hit me, the night of the coffee shop encounter had been the catalyst, but this was the ignition point, the moment of clarity. I didn't want to be haunted by memories any longer. I wanted to reclaim my narrative, to take back what he had stolen from me, my confidence, my peace, my story. I was tired of being seen as the villain in a story I didn't choose to write. In that moment, I made my decision. I wouldn't just fade into the background, I would rise from the ashes of this betrayal and write my own ending. I envisioned a plan, a strategy that wouldn't just brush him aside but would make him realize the repercussions of his actions. This wouldn't be some petty revenge, it would be a lesson, a powerful reminder that those who play with hearts can't do so without consequences. I started mapping out my plan carefully, with the precision of a chess player. The tools were all around me, my knowledge of his habits, the friends still loyal to me, those who had witnessed his manipulation firsthand. I remembered their faces in moments of doubt, their concern etched deeply in their expressions. They felt it too, I wasn't alone in this. I reached out to a couple of friends, the ones I trusted most, and began sowing the seeds of my revenge. They were slow to catch on to my intentions, but as I laid out the pieces, they saw the vision I had for my future and the urgency behind it. I wasn't lashing out in anger, I was reclaiming my power, forcing him to confront the chaos he had orchestrated, the narratives he had spun that painted me in a light I didn't deserve. I gathered evidence, screenshots of texts, photos, and memories that showcased a different story. Eric had painted me as the irrational one, but I would turn the tide and show everyone the real master, manipulator. I began crafting a narrative of my own, one that would highlight his deceit and paint the truth across our shared circle. Every day, the old emotions felt less like chains and more like fuel. The anxiety I had felt before evolved into determination, and for the first time in years, I found myself smiling, a genuine smile, one that came from a place of empowerment, not victimhood. I refused to be the fool any longer. The turning point had ignited something within me, an ember that burned fiercely against the shadows of my past. As the pieces began to fall into place, I felt the weight of my plan settle comfortably on my shoulders. This was not about just revenge, it was about transformation. It was about shedding the layers of hurt and anger and rising anew, a phoenix born from the ashes of betrayal. I would confront him, not with chaos or anger, but with the calm assurance of someone who had finally reclaimed their narrative. And as I plotted my revenge, I couldn't help but feel exhilarated. Eric wouldn't see it coming. He was still lost in his web of lies, blissfully unaware that the very thing he had tried to destroy was rising again, stronger and more determined than ever. This was only the beginning. As I sat on my couch, the shadows from the flickering screen casting distortions across the walls, I felt a surge of clarity. Revenge wasn't about chaos, it was about precision and strategy. I had been a pawn in Eric's game for far too long, and now it was time to flip the board. I meticulously crafted a plan that felt both liberating and intoxicating. Here it is, step by step. Step 1, gather evidence, the hunt for truth. I started a meticulous collection of evidence that highlighted Eric's manipulation. This included screenshots of texts exchanged between him and mutual friends, along with any incriminating posts he had made on social media that hinted at his less than honorable behavior. I also reached out to friends I had confidence in, those who'd seen his true colors and were willing to confirm my side of the story. The scavenger network. I created a secret group chat with my inner circle, ensuring we could communicate without the risk of Eric catching wind of our discussions. Each friend would be tasked with gathering intel about Eric's recent escapades, something to paint a clearer picture of his continued chaos. It was like building a small army, fortifying my side with the truth. Step 2, the social media trap, revamping my profile. I took a deep breath and revamped my social media profiles. I made them vibrant and filled with joy, showcasing my newfound happiness and independence. This wasn't just about showing Eric what he lost, it was also a way to lure him into a false sense of security. I knew he'd be keeping tabs on me, and I wanted him to think I was moving on effortlessly, planting subtle seeds. As my posts gained traction, I began to subtly plant information about my new pursuits, hobbies, travels, and accomplishments, things that would catch his eye and stir jealousy. I made sure my friends engaged with these posts, commenting about how I was thriving without him. It was all part of the ruse. Step 3, the confrontation setup, the event. I decided to host a small gathering, nothing too extravagant, just a few close friends who could help me orchestrate this encounter. I sent out invites to include some of Eric's friends, knowing that he would want to come. I needed him to walk into a carefully laid trap, where the truth would unravel like a tapestry before his eyes. The accidental meeting. I strategically planned for my closest ally to invite Eric specifically. Their connection would serve as the catalyst for him to attend. I wanted him to feel comfortable, akin to the days when we'd all hang out freely, blissfully unaware of the brewing storm. Step 4, the reveal, the night of reckoning. On the night of the gathering, I ensured the atmosphere was light and fun. The laughter around me would be the perfect cover for the tension building beneath the surface. I enlisted friends to casually drop hints about past events, things Eric had twisted, comments he'd made about me, moments I'd felt betrayed, the evidence revelation. As the evening wore on and drinks flowed, I subtly slipped into conversation the evidence I had gathered. I could see Eric's demeanor shift as my friends began to piece together the narrative he had crafted, revealing the truth behind the facade he had maintained. Step 5, the final blow, confronting him. At the height of the night, I planned to confront Eric directly. I would take a deep breath, channeling every ounce of confidence I had cultivated over the past months. The air was thick with laughter and conversation, yet I felt oddly detached, as if I were floating above the chaos, surveying the territory. The instant he walked through the door, I felt a jolt of adrenaline rush through me. Eric, always so effortlessly magnetic, greeted everyone with that same charming smile that used to make my heart race. He was oblivious to the storm brewing under the surface. As he made his way through the crowd, greeting old friends, I could see the hint of confusion etched into his expression as he noticed the awkward glances exchanged among our mutual friends. I let the moment linger, watching as he sunk deeper into the trap we had set, all the while maintaining my smile. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and I could feel my heart pounding to the rhythm of the impending confrontation. Finally, when the noise reached a peak, I stepped forward. "Hey, everyone," I called out, my voice cutting through the laughter like a knife through silence. "Can I have your attention for just a moment? I have something important to discuss." The room quieted, all eyes landing on me. I could see Eric's brow furrow slightly. He sensed something was off. I took a deep breath, locking eyes with him, my heart pounding in anticipation. "Eric," I said, my tone deceptively light, "it's so nice to see you again. It's been too long." The words dripped with sweetness, masking the underlying tension like a thin layer of icing over a bitter cake. He smiled, but there was hesitation behind it, a flicker of uncertainty that sent a shiver of satisfaction through me. "Yeah, it really has. Things have changed a lot." "Changed?" I echoed, drawing the attention of our friends closer. "You mean like how you've been busy spreading lies about me? Or is it the fact that you've been busy moving on with someone else while I was still picking up the pieces of my heart after you shattered it?" Gasps rippled through the crowd, and I could see Eric's face turn pale, his smile faltering as the weight of my words hung in the air. "Are you really going to do this here?" he asked, his voice low, almost pleading, as he tried to regain control of the situation. But the moment had passed, and I could see the cracks forming in his carefully constructed facade. "Yes, I am," I replied, my voice steady, gaining strength with every word. "Because I'm done being the villain in your story. I'm here to share a different perspective, one that highlights the chaos you've inflicted on me and others. I gestured toward our friends, their faces filled with a mixture of sympathy and shock. Did you really think you could keep spinning your narrative without anyone questioning the truth? I continued, my pulse racing. Did you think I wouldn't fight back? And then, I pulled out my phone, the screen illuminating with the evidence I had gathered. Here's a collection of your messages. Texts to friends where you belittled me, where you turned me into the crazy ex that everyone whispers about. I held the phone up, letting the group see the screen. Remember when you told Maria that I was too clingy? Or how you had the audacity to say you were just trying to help me when all you did was dismantle my self-worth? I locked eyes with Eric, refusing to look away. I was not the problem. You were the after the truth spilled out like the wine that had once been our shared laughter. The room fell into an eerie silence, thick with tension. I could feel the collective breath of my friends, the weight of their gazes pressing down on Eric. Every word I had painstakingly crafted hung in the air, echoing like a drumbeat in my chest. This was it, the reckoning, the moment I had longed for, but never truly believed would come. Eric's reaction was immediate, his face shifted from shock to anger in a heartbeat. You're making a huge mistake, he hissed, his voice low, yet laced with desperation. I could see the mask of charm slipping, revealing the chaotic energy I'd grown so familiar with, the master manipulator caught off guard, unable to weave a new narrative in this moment. But I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I felt liberated, empowered. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my story, my life. As I stood there, my heart racing, a sense of purpose washed over me, drowning out the fear that had once held me captive. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Eric, I declared, my voice steady. You've been spinning your tale for too long, and I refuse to be the scapegoat for your insecurities. I deserve to be seen, truly seen, by my friends, by those who matter. The crowd shifted, murmurs of disbelief and sympathy rippling through the group. I could feel the support surrounding me, bolstering my confidence, and Eric shrank under the weight of my words. The truth was a powerful force, and I had finally harnessed it. I continued, let me remind you of how many hearts you've toyed with, how many lives you've manipulated, all while playing the innocent boy next door. Friends here have seen it, felt it, just as I have. You think you're untouchable, but tonight, you're the one exposed. With each revelation, I watched as my friends exchanged glances, recognition dawning in their eyes. They began to piece together the puzzle Eric had long distorted, suddenly understanding the narrative from my perspective rather than the caricature he had painted. The laughter from before had turned into an uncomfortable tension, and I could see the cracks in Eric's facade deepen. One of my friends, Mia, stepped forward, her voice steady. I've seen it too, Eric. The way you twist stories, how you manipulate people. It's not okay. Her words were like a ripple effect, giving others permission to speak out, to embrace their truths. Eric's face flushed, his charisma fading into something unrecognizable. You're all just, he started, but the words faltered, his voice trembling as the realization set in. He was losing control. The crowd wasn't there to support him anymore, they were rallying around me, the one he had tried to vilify. I felt a rush of gratitude and solidarity, each supportive voice pulling me back from the brink of my past insecurities. I thought I was the one who needed to apologize, I said, letting my gaze linger on Eric, but it seems the table has turned. I'm here to take back my voice, my power, and my story. The air was electric, charged with the simultaneous release of tension and the dawning clarity of my friend's realizations. I had transformed from a shadow of my former self into a beacon of truth, shining brightly in the dark shadows Eric had tried so hard to cast over me. In that moment, something shifted. I could see the fear in.
It's strange how life can twist and turn so unexpectedly, like a river carving its way through rock. If you had asked me 2 years ago, while I held my newborn girl in my arms, if I believed in payback, I would have laughed it off, reveling in the joy of new motherhood. But here I am now, sitting in the dim light of my living room, the walls adorned with faded memories and echoes of laughter that feel impossibly distant. My name? Well, I don't think that matters much anymore. What matters is understanding how I ended up here, how love turned to bitterness and hope to despair, all because of the very man who once made my heart race the way it did under the soft, warm glow of fairy lights on our first date. Adam. He was everything I thought I ever wanted: charming, ambitious, and, perhaps most importantly, the father of my child. But what a beautiful illusion that was. The summer sun poured through the window that day, one of those golden afternoons where everything feels perfect, the world wrapped in a cozy blanket of warmth. I had been nursing Lily, her tiny fingers wrapping around my thumb, her baby coos filling the house with a sweetness that made the chaos of new parenthood seem bearable. Adam was supposed to come home early from work that day. He promised he'd help me with the mountain of laundry piling up like an insurmountable wave. "I've got your back," he texted, yet his late-night meetings had turned into an affair with ambition, leaving me to navigate the uncertainties of new motherhood alone. And I should have known, when a man is searching for recognition in the boardroom, he often forgets the love that exists at home. I can still feel the sting of disappointment, like a raw wound that never quite healed. I would wait, staring at the clock, praying he'd walk in and sweep me off my feet, but instead, I'd be left clutching my baby girl, wondering if I was enough for both of us. Then came the night that shattered everything. The call I received from an unknown number, his voice echoing in my mind as I listened to the words that cut deep, each syllable coated in betrayal. "It's not what you think," he pleaded, but those words were empty sounds in a spiraling universe. I wanted him to hear me, to listen for once, but he'd already chosen his path, one paved with shattered promises and whispered lies. So, here I am, looking back at the moments that led to this, a single mother standing at the precipice of revenge, the darkness swirling around me like a storm. I know it's not healthy to dwell on such thoughts, to cling to anger like a lifeline, but sometimes, the heart doesn't listen to what the mind knows is wrong. I can't change what happened, nor do I want to forget. Instead, I find solace in the notion that, perhaps, there's a way to reclaim my voice, a way to ensure Adam finally understands the weight of his choices. Just a little nudge, a flicker of retribution, and I'll show him that I am not just a shadow lurking in the corners of his life. I'm stronger than he ever believed. And this is where our story begins. As the days blurred into nights, the isolation began to seep beneath my skin, gnawing at my sanity. The first sign of Adam's betrayal didn't hit me like a storm, it crept in like a thief in the night, subtle but insidious. I remember the way he would come home with a scent of cologne that wasn't his, sharp and foreign, each time he claimed to be working late. I brushed it off, convincing myself that it was merely a new fragrance he had taken a liking to. How naive I was. But then, those late nights turned into a routine. The excuses piled up like the dirty dishes in my sink, and I could feel the tension growing between us, like a taut string ready to snap. I'd sit on the worn-out couch, Lily cradled in my arms, her soft breaths a soothing balm on my frayed nerves. "He'll come home soon," I'd tell myself. But with each minute that ticked by, doubt seeped into my heart. The moment I discovered the truth is etched into my memory like a scar. It was a rainy Thursday, the kind of day that magnifies feelings of melancholy. I had just finished a long day of juggling baby cries and diaper changes when my phone buzzed with a message from a friend. I saw Adam at the bar with someone. "You should talk to him." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. At first, I felt disbelief. I wanted to laugh it off, to write it off as gossip or misunderstanding. But the fluttering in my stomach told a different story. I hesitated, fear mixing with an urge I couldn't quite identify. I should confront him, but what would I say? I had no proof. Just whispers. But the instinct to protect my family ignited a fire within me, urging me to investigate further. That evening, I put on my coat, Lily bundled up in her tiny onesie, and I drove towards the bar my friend had mentioned, the place where our laughter echoed just a year prior. I was a ghost of myself, floating through the parking lot, the neon lights casting an eerie glow on my skin. The air was thick with tension and tainted with dread. Peering through the glass, I saw him, my Adam, leaning against the bar, a beautiful woman with striking blonde hair perched on the stool beside him. My heart raced, each beat laced with disbelief. I waited for the warmth of anger to wash over me, but the chill of betrayal enveloped me instead. I watched as he leaned in, laughing in a way that felt painfully foreign. I wanted to turn away, to shield myself from the reality that was unfolding before my very eyes, but I was rooted to the spot. Each laugh echoed in my ears, a haunting melody of our past. I can't explain the flood of emotions that crashed over me: confusion, sadness, anger, all intertwined, creating a tempest within. The little girl in my arms began to stir, sensing my turmoil. I couldn't help but think, why can't you just see me? Hear me? And then it hit me hard. I was not just watching a man betray me, I felt like a fool for believing his promises, for clinging to the idea of us. The weight of anger turned to guilt, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had somehow failed to be the partner he needed. Had I not pushed him enough? Was I just another obstacle in his pursuit of greatness? The inner dialogue twisted itself around my heart, squeezing tighter with every breath. In that moment, something shifted. I realized I was losing myself in a world where trust had turned to ashes and love evaporated into bitterness. I felt fragile, like a glass figurine left to the mercy of an earthquake. The laughter I once cherished now felt like clattering shards, echoing mockingly in my ears. The weeks that followed were a blur of humiliation and solitude. I confronted Adam about what I'd seen, my voice trembling yet laced with the strength I thought I had lost. He denied it, of course. It was just a colleague from work, he said, eyes wide with feigned innocence. But I could see the flicker of panic in his gaze, a fleeting glimpse of the man he was attempting to mask beneath layers of deception. You're being paranoid. Paranoid. That word dug into me like a knife, twisting and turning until it broke the surface of my skin. I desperately wanted to believe him. But once that veil of trust was ripped away, how could I? Each time I saw him, I felt like I was staring at a stranger, someone who had betrayed the very essence of what we built together. And so the isolation deepened. Friends tried to reach out, but I pushed them away, convinced they wouldn't understand. I felt like a burden, a woman too broken to be fixed. When they invited me out, I made excuses: I have to stay home with the baby, or I'm too tired. I was terrified that they might see the hurt in my eyes, witness the unraveling of my spirit. One night, while scrolling through social media, an act of self-torture, I now realize, I stumbled upon a picture of Adam, his arm wrapped around that woman. The caption read, "Best night ever." A wave of nausea crashed over me as I dropped my phone onto the coffee table, watching it bounce clumsily before falling to the floor. How could he do this to me? To us? My heart shattered further into pieces, each fragment a reminder of what I once believed was love. I remember looking down at Lily, her innocent face unaware of the darkness looming over her life. What kind of future could I possibly give her? My world felt like it was crumbling, and just when I thought things couldn't get worse, an even more crushing blow landed. One evening, I received an unexpected visit from Adam's mother, a woman I had loved and respected. She arrived with a sympathetic smile, but there was something ominous lurking in her expression. "I just wanted to check on you," she said, but it quickly became clear that this was not a social call. "Honey, Adam has shared some concerns about you. He thinks you need help." Her words hit me like an icy wave, crashing onto the shore of my already battered self-esteem. Help? What did he tell her? I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, the vein in my temple throbbing in reaction to the anger boiling inside me. I was not the one who needed help, he was the one who had disrespected the very foundation of our family. I managed to nod politely, despite the whirlwind of emotions raging within. After she left, I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, the weight of her visit pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. I felt the walls closing in, the isolation suffocating me. It became increasingly clear that my life was spiraling into a pit of despair, and the harder I tried to claw my way out, the deeper I seemed to sink. In those moments, I lost trust not just in Adam, but in myself. A flicker of a bold thought ignited within me, not just the desire to get back at him, but a desperate need to reclaim my identity. I was tired of being the silent victim in a narrative I hadn't chosen. That night, as the darkness enveloped my home, I sat on the floor surrounded by discarded toys and the remnants of my former life. My heart pounded with realization, a surge of clarity cutting through the fog of anger and despair. I was done being passive. I had been patient long enough, waiting for someone to hear me, to acknowledge the pain I felt. But maybe I shouldn't be waiting for apologies or changes from someone who couldn't comprehend the damage he had done. Instead, I needed to take control of my own story. The warmth of my fury coursed through my veins, igniting a spark I hadn't felt in months. I thought about the moments Adam had taken away from me, the moments of laughter and joy, the dreams of a family I had fought so hard to create. And suddenly, the idea of revenge didn't seem so monstrous, rather, it felt like a necessary step towards rebuilding my shattered self. What if I could show him the consequences of his actions? The thought curled around me like a warm blanket as I began to imagine the possibilities. Revenge didn't have to be about violence or chaos, it could be an intricate web of calculated actions, a way to force him to truly see the depths of my pain. Then, the final straw snapped. I stumbled across a text thread on his phone, carelessly left unlocked one evening. His casual exchanges with that woman were not only flirty but also full of plans, shared evenings, secret rendezvous, and inside jokes that made my heart sink. I felt the betrayal burn anew, and with it, a dark resolution coiled tightly around my heart. If he thought he could just walk away from the life we had built together, leaving me to pick up the pieces, then I would show him how deep his betrayal truly ran. In that moment, a cold, calculated clarity descended upon me. I began to imagine how I could turn the tables, how I could let him feel what it was like to lose something precious. I envisioned ways to disrupt his comfortable world, to make him question the choices he had made and the life he had discarded. What if I could expose his lies? What if I could reveal the truth to his family, his friends, the very people whose views he had manipulated to maintain his facade? The thought propelled me into planning mode, every detail meticulously weaving together like the pieces of a puzzle. Was it petty? Maybe. But wasn't it, in some twisted way, cathartic? I felt alive with purpose, a sensation I hadn't experienced in what felt like an eternity. As I allowed the idea of revenge to consume me, I felt an exhilarating rush of power. It was mine. It was a reclaiming of my narrative, a way to ensure that Adam understood the depth of his actions and the pain they had caused. I would no longer be the woman sitting in silence, waiting for validation. Instead, I would be the force that would shake his world to its core. With each passing day, I meticulously crafted my plan, the blueprint for my revenge unfolding before me like a well-practiced script. I would gather evidence, document every betrayal, and set the stage for his revealing. I would reveal to him, in the most public way possible, how his choices would impact not just me, but the very fabric of his life. It was time to stop being the victim. If he thought he could gather evidence, the first step in my plan was to collect undeniable proof of Adam's infidelity. I started discreetly monitoring his social media, saving screenshots of his flirtatious exchanges with that woman. I also reached out to a few of our mutual friends, keeping my inquiries casual. I wanted to gather intel on what he had told them about me and our situation. I even saved the messages my friend had sent me about seeing them together, dating back to the first time he had betrayed my trust. The more evidence I had, the stronger my case would be. 2. Recruit allies. I knew I wasn't alone in this fight. My best friend, Sarah, had always been a loyal confidant and someone who could help me execute my plan. I reached out to her, and after pouring my heart out, she agreed to help me. Together, we brainstormed ways to ensure Adam would not only feel the pain of his actions but also understand the consequences of losing me and Lily. Sarah brought new ideas to the table, including ways to catch him off guard. 3. Create a fake social media account. With Sarah's help, I created a fake social media account using an alias. It was time to infiltrate Adam's world. I used this account to connect with his colleagues and friends, slipping into the social circles he frequented without him suspecting a thing. I wanted to gather more insider information about his activities and, if possible, find out how many people knew about his betrayal. 4. Plant the seed of doubt. I began to casually drop hints to Adam's friends about his behavior. I would express my concerns over how distant he had become, saying things like, "I hope he's not getting too caught up with those late hours at the office," or, "Has he mentioned anything about an affair?" I wanted to create an atmosphere where he would feel uneasy, unsure of who knew what. This would sow the seeds of doubt in his mind, making him second-guess his actions and the trust he had in those around him. 5. Set up a reveal. Once I had gathered enough evidence and created the perfect environment of tension, it was time to orchestrate the grand reveal. I planned a casual dinner party at my place, inviting a few of our close friends and family members, including Adam. It was the perfect setting, a place where I could create a facade of normalcy while preparing to unveil the truth. 6. The final touch, the night of the dinner party arrived. Sarah helped me set the atmosphere, decorating the table with candles and flowers, creating an ambience that would contrast sharply with the storm brewing underneath. I prepared a slideshow of our memories together, mixed in with screenshots of Adam's text to that woman. The juxtaposition would be striking. As everyone sat down to dinner, I planned to have a casual conversation about relationships, love, and loyalty, letting the tension build before dropping my bombshell. 7. Execute the plan. As the dinner progressed, I would navigate the conversation towards fidelity, sharing stories of trust and betrayal. When the moment felt right, I would pull out my phone, telling everyone I had something special to share. I'd start the slideshow as a nostalgic trip down memory lane, but slowly, the tone would shift. The laughter would dim as the pictures of the happy family melted into evidence of Adam's lies. 8. The climax. At that moment, I would pause for effect before saying, "But I think we need to talk about what really happened behind the scenes." The atmosphere was thick, charged with an electric anticipation as friends laughed and shared stories around the dinner table. I felt both alive and numb, the delicate balance of excitement and dread swirling within me. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows on their faces, yet I was acutely aware of the tension lurking beneath the surface. When I finally stood to present my slideshow, I could hardly hear the buzzing conversations around me. My heart thundered in my chest, drowning out the laughter that felt so foreign now. With trembling fingers, I tapped my phone, igniting the screen to life. The first image appeared, a blissful family picture of us at the park, Lily giggling in Adam's arms. "Remember this?" I began, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "The day we thought we had it all figured out." Laughter echoed through the room, momentarily easing the tension. But as the images shifted to happier moments, I could feel Adam's gaze on me, the flicker of confusion morphing into wariness. His brow furrowed slightly, but I pressed on. Each image slowly morphed into the next, transitioning seamlessly into the darker moments of my betrayal. I casually commented on our beautiful memories, but I could see Adam's smile dimming with every passing image. The lightheartedness began to fade as I approached the climax of my plan. Then, the mood took a sharp turn. With a breath that trembled in my throat, I changed the tempo of my speech. "But sometimes, things aren't what they seem," I said, my voice steady, almost eerily calm. I could feel the eyes of our friends shifting toward Adam, and the delighted chatter slowly faded into an uneasy silence. "Sometimes, what we thought was love is merely a mask for betrayal." As the next image flickered onto the screen, it displayed the damning text messages, the ones that had made my heart plummet into despair. I could hear the collective intake of breath from the room. Adam's face turned pale, his expression morphing from confusion to horror as the screen filled with evidence of his betrayal, the words jumping off the screen like daggers. "Look at this," I said, my voice rising above the mounting silence. "This is what you've been doing behind closed doors, Adam?" I felt liberated as the truth rolled off my tongue, a cathartic release that sent chills down my spine. "While I was home caring for our daughter, you were out here flirting, lying, and betraying the trust we built together." His eyes darted around the room, searching for support, but the faces of our friends began to scrutinize him, incredulity etched into their expressions. I could see the gears turning in their minds, the realization gripping them as they processed the betrayal they had, unknowingly, been complicit in. Adam opened his mouth in protest, desperately trying to grasp at the straws of defense. "It's not what you think. I can explain," he stammered, but his voice faltered against the weight of the truth. "Explain?" I shot back, letting the bitterness seep into my words. "Explain what?" "How you've undermined every promise we made. How you thought I wouldn't find out." I stepped closer, my heart racing with a potent combination of rage and empowerment. "You should have listened, Adam. I begged you to hear me when I told you I felt alone. But you turned your back on me." His expression morphed into one of panic as I swiped through more damning texts, revealing his careless words, though the room was stifling, the silence that followed my revelation thick and uncomfortable. Every eye was on Adam, their disbelief mingling with the dawning realization of the man they thought they knew. My pulse quickened as I watched him squirm under the weight of his own actions. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the culmination of my plan, where his betrayal was laid bare before those who had once supported him unconditionally. But amidst the chaos of emotions swirling around me, an unexpected wave of sympathy washed over me. This was not just Adam's downfall, it was also the unraveling of a family, a daughter who would inevitably bear the scars of this moment. As I watched his face pale, I could feel the anger within me shift into something oddly bittersweet. Was this really what I wanted? As whispers of disbelief filled the air, I turned my gaze away from Adam, my heart aching for Lily, who was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in her life. All she wanted was a loving family, and here I was, tearing apart the very fabric of that dream. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. I didn't want this, I confessed, my heart heavy with the realization that while I sought revenge, it would only lead to more pain for my child. In that moment, I understood the duality of revenge. It offered a fleeting sense of empowerment but carried with it an undeniable burden. I had fought so hard to reclaim my narrative, yet I couldn't escape the undeniable truth that every action has consequences, especially when those actions involve the people we love. Adam stumbled out of the chair he had been sitting in, his face flushed with humiliation. You set me up," he accused, his voice trembling. But I could see the guilt flickering in his eyes, the way he struggled to find words that would absolve him of responsibility. My heart hardened again. He was still trying to twist the narrative to his advantage, even now. "It's not a setup if you walked right into it," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "You chose this path, Adam. You chose to betray me. And now, the truth is finally out." The tension in the room was palpable. Our friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats, glancing between Adam and me as if waiting for a cue. I could sense the rift forming, the bonds of friendship being tested under the weight of betrayal. It felt like a reckoning, an inevitable fallout that had been brewing for far too long. As I continued to confront Adam, the truth began to settle over the room like a dark cloud. Some friends, once firmly in his corner, started to express their disbelief and disappointment. "How could you do this to her?" One of them finally spoke up, a friend who had always seen the good in Adam. "We trusted you." Their words cut deeper than any dagger. I had imagined this moment so many times, but hearing his friends question him, seeing the disappointment etched on their faces, stung with an unexpected intensity. I had wanted to dismantle his world, to bring him down, but I never envisioned the collateral damage it would leave in its wake. I felt the tears mist in my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not now. Not when I was so close to reclaiming my power. "I deserve to be heard, and so does Lily," I reiterated, my voice stronger than before. "I won't let this man take away my right to my own happiness." Eventually, Adam stumbled out of the room.
Title: Got scammed by someone I thought was a client. Looking for creative, legal, ways to inconvenience him. I never thought I would find myself in this position. The flickering glow of my laptop screen cast shadows on the walls of my small apartment, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background a constant reminder that life goes on even when it feels like yours has hit a wall. It's late, the kind of late that stretches into early morning, and I sit here, fingers poised over the keyboard, fighting the urge to drown my sorrows in another glass of cheap red wine. You see, it all started with a simple email. Just a few weeks ago, I was eagerly typing away in my cozy little corner, fueled by ambition and the intoxicating hope of building my freelance graphic design business. I had just quit my stable yet suffocating day job, ready to embrace the chaos of self-employment and live my dreams. I was filled with the kind of optimism that can only come from being on the cusp of something new. That's when he appeared. A client, or so I thought, reaching out with the charm of a seasoned salesman and the confidence of someone who's used to getting what they want. Let's call him Mark. Mark had an air of success about him, a smooth talker, with just the right blend of flattery and urgency that made me feel like I was suddenly very important. His words were tinged with a hint of desperation, as though he needed my creative touch to pull him out of a bind. I vividly remember one evening, sitting on my couch in a worn-out pair of sweatpants, the aroma of takeout still lingering in the air from dinner. He FaceTimed me, his face half lit by a desk lamp, shadows dancing across his features as he rambled on about his project. He spoke with such enthusiasm, throwing around terms like market domination and innovative branding, and I found myself swept up in his vision. I could almost see the money flowing in, the success I'd always dreamed of. But beneath that polished exterior lay something darker, something I was too blinded by ambition to see. It wasn't until I had poured hours of work into designs and concepts, dreaming of the commission that was to come, that the truth began to unravel. Communication slowed, excuses piled up, and as the days turned into weeks, my heart sank with every unanswered message. It was only after I finally confronted him that the truth dawned on me: I had been duped. Now, here I am. Bitter, frustrated, and left with nothing but an empty bank account and a bruised ego. I could scream, I could cry, but instead, I'm letting my mind wander into darker territories. Revenge isn't always sweet, but sometimes, it's the only remedy for the ache of betrayal. I can't afford to go after him in any traditional way, a lawsuit would cost more than I could ever hope to recoup. But what if I could find tiny, legal ways to make his life just a bit more inconvenient? The idea simmers beneath my skin, a cocktail of indignation and creativity, begging to be unleashed. I'm not a malicious person by nature, nor do I relish in causing chaos for others. But this is personal. And I'm determined to turn the tables, even if it means getting a little creative. So, here I am, ready to embark on this unexpected detour in my journey, trying to mask the fine line between vengeance and justice. The shadows of my living room grow longer as I ponder my first move, and the weight of betrayal settles in my chest, pressing down like a heavy stone. In the weeks following my last conversation with Mark, I oscillated between disbelief and anger, replaying moments in my mind like a broken record. Each time I thought I had reached a conclusion, another memory would surface, and the confusion would only deepen. The way he smiled as he praised my portfolio, his overwhelming enthusiasm, was it all a facade? Did he ever really intend to hire me, or was I just another name on a list of people to prey upon? I can still hear his voice echoing in my mind, an insistent siren call that now twists into mockery. The hardest part was not just the financial loss, though that stung painfully. It was the betrayal of trust, that feeling of being played. I had entrusted him with my hopes and creativity, and he stripped me bare. My self-worth crumbled with each unanswered email. I felt like a fool. How could I have been so naive? How could I have believed everything he said? It gnawed at me, a relentless itch I couldn't scratch. I vividly recall sitting at my kitchen table one evening, staring blankly at the sketches I had poured my heart into. They were all magnificent, or so I thought, yet now they felt tainted. Every stroke of my pencil seemed like a cruel joke, a reminder of my gullibility. I could almost hear the laughter of my friends and family, the "I told you so" whispers echoing around me. They had warned me, hadn't they? Be careful with clients online. Trust no one. But here I was, painted into a corner by my own ambition and naivety. As I scrolled through social media, I saw his smiling face flash across the screen, promoting his latest venture. My heart raced with a mix of fury and heartbreak. How could he flaunt his success after stealing my time, my energy, and my hard-earned money? It was like a slap in the face, a reminder that while I wallowed in my anger, he was moving on effortlessly. And that's when it hit me, a rush of indignation that ignited a fire within. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, I could channel my feelings into action. I didn't need to be a victim any longer. I could be the architect of my own escape from this nightmare. I didn't want to resort to anything illegal or harmful, I wanted to find ways to inconvenience him, to make him feel the ripple of my discontent without stepping outside the bounds of legality. My mind raced with ideas, each more devious than the last. What if I reported him to every platform he was on, warning potential clients about the smooth talker who was really a con artist. Or maybe I could sign him up for a dozen newsletters and mailing lists, clogging his inbox with junk he never asked for. A small grin tugged at my lips as I imagined the irritation creeping into his daily grind, the disruption of his successful life. Yet, beneath the layers of anger, I felt a pang of guilt. Who was I to stoop to these levels? But then I remembered the way he had discarded me, my time, my work, my trust, like a used tissue. It made my resolve stronger. I wouldn't let him off easy. I wanted to show him the consequences of his actions, to make sure he understood that his deception had repercussions. As the night wore on, I could hardly contain the chaotic swirl of emotions within me. Anger transformed into a twisted sense of purpose. My life felt like a blank canvas, and I was ready to paint it with the colors of my revenge. But as my scheming went on, things took an unexpected turn. I decided to start small. Rather than jumping into an elaborate plan, I opted for something more subtle. I registered a fake email address, one that felt innocuous enough, and crafted a message that would send chills down Mark's spine when he opened it. "I've got an interesting proposal for you regarding your latest endeavor," I wrote, mimicking the style he had used to draw me in. I even attached a poorly made graphic that I knew he would find cringe-worthy. Just a tiny inconvenience, a moment of confusion to disrupt his day. When I hit send, a thrill coursed through me. For a moment, I felt vindicated. But then came the doubt. What if he didn't even bother to respond? What if he had already forgotten me entirely? I spent the next few days obsessively checking my email, and when nothing came, frustration replaced my fleeting joy. Then came the crushing realization that my petty revenge had only served to amplify my isolation. Friends began to drift away, their texts becoming fewer and more far between. I couldn't help but suspect that they found my situation laughable. The weight of shame pressed heavily on my chest. How could I let this happen? I thought, trying to reach out for support, but feeling more and more like a burden to those who could help me. One evening, I decided to share my experience on an online forum. I crafted a post that detailed my plight, hoping for support and validation from strangers who might empathize. Instead, I was met with ridicule. "You fell for that? Classic newbie mistake." One commenter sneered, while another added, "Suck it up, you'll learn for next time." Their words pierced like daggers, deepening my sense of betrayal, not just by Mark, but by the world. I felt alone, adrift in a sea of scorn while my own dreams of success slipped further away. Feeling more isolated than ever, I sank into a deeper spiral. I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was laughing at my misfortune. Even my family, who had celebrated my leap into freelance life, seemed to look at me with a mix of pity and disappointment. Each conversation felt strained, punctuated by awkward pauses as they struggled to avoid mentioning my failure. The weight of their unvoiced judgments hung between us like a thick fog, suffocating my spirit. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing hour, my resentment grew like a storm within me. It was a tempest I struggled to contain, and then I knew I had to escalate my plans. I began to map out a more elaborate scheme, one that would demand his attention. I started considering social media, a platform he loved to use for self-promotion. I crafted a series of fake reviews on his business profile. I faked accounts, churning out glowing endorsements that quickly turned sour. I never received the services I paid for. One read: "Stay away from this fraud." Another warned. I sat back, heart racing with excitement and apprehension, as I watched his reviews go from 5 stars to a dismal 2 in a matter of days. Each notification felt like a small victory, but it also deepened my emotional turmoil. Did I really want to stoop this low? But with every keystroke, I felt more powerful. And yet, every moment of triumph was punctured by my creeping sense of loneliness. I had lost friends, and now, I was losing a piece of myself to this dark desire for revenge. The turning point came on an evening soaked in silence and stagnant frustration. It was a Saturday night, or at least that's what my calendar told me. The days felt like a blur of grief and disappointment at this point. I found myself scrolling aimlessly through social media again, desperately seeking the escape I once found in my art. That's when I stumbled upon a video, a heartfelt story shared by a fellow freelancer who had faced a similar fate. She spoke about her journey, the pain of betrayal, and how she had risen from the ashes of deceit to reclaim her power. Her story resonated deep within me. As I watched her speak, I felt a mix of admiration, jealousy, and rage boiling just beneath the surface. Why didn't I think of that? I thought. Here she was, channeling her anger into inspiration, creating art that turned her pain into something beautiful and meaningful. And what was I doing? Wallowing in bitterness, plotting petty inconveniences that would only serve to distract me from my own healing. As her video ended, I sat in the dark, staring at the screen, wrestling with the reality of my choices. I could continue down this path of revenge, but what was the end game? Would I feel fulfilled if Mark's life was thrown into chaos? Or would I only be deepening my own sense of isolation, allowing my anger to consume me like a fire without purpose? That's when the final straw hit. I glanced at my reflection in the darkened screen, and it felt like staring into the eyes of a stranger. I barely recognized myself. The once vibrant artist full of passion and dreams now seemed like a hollow shell, marked by bitterness and resentment. Suddenly, it all clicked. I didn't want to become a person who thrived on the suffering of others. This cycle of vengeance was only going to lead me deeper into darkness. My heart pounded as clarity washed over me, an awakening of sorts. I didn't need revenge, I needed to reclaim my narrative, to rise above the hurt and let it fuel my creativity instead. I thought about my art, my passion, and how I once imagined using it to inspire others. I had been given an incredible opportunity to start fresh, to reshape my life beyond the confines of betrayal. Why not use my experiences to create something that would resonate with others instead of wallowing in the shadows? What if I could turn this experience into a project that not only healed me but could also help those who had faced similar betrayals? In that moment, I realized I had two choices. I could continue to plot Mark's inconveniences, each plan spiraling further into a darker abyss of resentment, or I could rise above and use my experiences to create art that spoke to the pain and frustration of betrayal while also celebrating resilience and growth. With shaky hands, I opened a new document and began to write. I poured out my heart, translating my anger, sadness, and disappointment into words that reflected my journey. It was cathartic. I found solace in the ink flowing across the page, and with every word, I felt lighter. I wrote about feeling duped by someone I thought would elevate my career, and about the dark places my mind had wandered into. I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me as I wrote. I could choose to tell my story on my own terms. No more lurking in the shadows. No more thoughts of revenge clouding my vision. Instead, I would shine a light on my experience, turning it into something meaningful. I decided then and there that I would create a series of illustrations and an online gallery, showcasing with my heart set on channeling my emotions into something constructive. I mapped out a plan that would serve as my canvas for healing. It wasn't just about getting back at Mark, it was about reclaiming my narrative, transforming my pain into something powerful. Here's how I envision my multi-step revenge plan. Step 1, document my experience. I would begin by crafting an article that detailed my interactions with Mark. This would include chronological narrative, writing a thorough account of how I was drawn in by his charm and then abandoned when he ghosted me, lessons learned, extracting valuable lessons about trust and caution in the freelance world, emphasizing the importance of due diligence before engaging with potential clients. Step 2, create a visual story using my graphic design skills. I would create a series of illustrations that tell my story in a compelling way. Each piece would symbolize a different stage of my experience, from hope to betrayal, and finally to empowerment. For example, Illustration 1, a bright, colorful image of me at my laptop, full of excitement as I receive the initial email. Illustration 2, a darker, shadowy depiction of Mark's FaceTime call, where doubt starts to creep in. Illustration 3, a burst of colors representing my emotional journey toward resilience, with imagery that echoes rebirth and hope. Step 3, launch a blog and social media campaign. Next, I would launch a blog and corresponding social media accounts dedicated to sharing insights about navigating the freelance world. My content would include advice posts, sharing strategies on how to identify potential scams and avoid being taken advantage of, empowering stories, featuring other freelancers who have faced similar challenges, creating a community of support, art features, showcasing my illustrations to visually narrate the journey of resilience, inviting others to share their stories through art. Step 4, engage the community to build momentum. I would host a virtual gallery showcase of my illustrations. The plan would involve event promotion, using social media to create buzz around the event, promoting the concept of turning pain into art and resilience, interactive sessions, inviting attendees to share their experiences and thoughts in live discussions, fostering a supportive environment where people can connect. Step 5, public awareness and advocacy. I wouldn't stop there. I wanted to make sure Mark faced some consequences for his actions, albeit indirectly. I decided to take the following measures: review reporting. I would leave honest reviews on platforms where Mark promoted his business, detailing my experience while ensuring I stayed factual. I would share how he had scammed me without being defamatory, just enough to make potential clients think twice. Networking with peers. I'd reach out to fellow freelancers through forums and social media, sharing my story and urging them to report any suspicious behavior they encountered from Mark. Step 6, channel my energy into creation. Finally, I resolved to focus on my art and my business. Inspired by my experiences, I would create a new branding collection that embodied resilience, with designs symbolizing recovery and empowerment. This would not only serve as a cathartic release for me but also attract clients who appreciated authenticity and depth in artistry. Step 7, reflect and grow. As I delved into this multifaceted plan, I knew the final step was crucial: reflection. I'd set aside time to journal about my feelings as I progressed through this journey. This would include gratitude lists, focusing on the things I gratefully appreciated, acknowledging the support I still had and the strength I found within myself, mindfulness practices, engaging in meditation to clear my mind of negativity, allowing creativity to flourish. As I mapped out my plan, I felt an exhilarating rush of empowerment coursing through me. No longer shackled by anger and resentment, I was rising above the ashes of betrayal. I turned my back on petty schemes and set my sights on something far more meaningful. My heart raced with anticipation, knowing that I was about to embark on a journey of self-discovery, healing, and growth. Climax: the night of the virtual gallery showcase. The night of my virtual gallery showcase arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. I had spent weeks preparing, pouring my essence into my illustrations and words. I donned my favorite outfit, a simple black dress paired with a vibrant scarf I had designed myself, a symbol of my resurgence. The clock ticked closer to the hour, and I felt a knot of anxiety twist in my stomach. As the event began, I took a deep breath, listening to the soft hum of my own heartbeat. The screen lit up with faces, strangers and friends alike, all gathered to witness my journey. I glanced at my meticulously curated gallery, a tapestry of emotions displayed in vivid colors. With each image I shared, I conveyed the roller coaster of my experience, the flicker of hope, the plunge into despair, and finally, the eruption of resilience. I could see my viewers leaning in, their expressions shifting as I wove my story into each stroke of my brush. I felt the connection enveloping us, a powerful reminder that we were not alone in our struggles. I noticed a familiar name pop up in the comments, a surge of disbelief coursing through me. Mark had joined the event. My heart raced, a mix of anxiety and adrenaline. What was he doing here? Was he trying to diminish my moment, seeking to sabotage my story? My gaze narrowed as I tried to maintain my composure. As I finished my presentation, I glanced at the chat box, reading a flurry of supportive comments, cheers for my bravery, and encouragement from my peers. I felt a wave of validation wash over me. This was my moment. But then, Mark's comment flashed on the screen like a bolt of lightning: "Glad to see the amateur is still at it. Good luck with your future failures." A hush fell over the virtual room, the atmosphere thick with tension. Gasps erupted as people processed his words. My resolve wavered, but then I remembered the purpose of this event. It was not just about me, it was about those who had faced similar betrayals. It was about showcasing resilience. I took a deep breath and addressed the audience. "Thank you, Mark, for your comment. It reminds me of the importance of rising above negativity. I refuse to let anyone define my worth, especially not someone who has taken advantage of others." My voice trembled but carried an underlying strength that I hadn't felt before. I would not allow him to drag me back down into a pit of self-doubt. My audience erupted in applause, their support wrapping around me like a warm embrace. I could see their faces lit up with understanding, empathy, and, yes, anger for me. The emotions swelling inside me reached a breaking point. It was then that I decided to turn the tides. I launched into a passionate monologue about the importance of community and support in the freelance world, encouraging everyone to share their own experiences, good and bad. I exposed the harsh realities, the aftermath, a new beginning. As the applause faded and the comments began to flow in, a sense of relief washed over me. The virtual gallery had turned into a powerful platform for catharsis, both for me and for many others who joined. It felt as though we had collectively shattered the silence surrounding scams and betrayal in the freelance world. I had expected some backlash, but the overwhelming support from the community filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. In that moment, I understood that my journey was no longer just about getting back at Mark, it was about building something positive from the wreckage he had left behind. I went to bed that night feeling lighter than I had in weeks, a slight smile on my face as I replayed the event in my mind. I had taken control of my narrative, and rather than allowing Mark to dictate my emotions, I was now steering my own ship. However, I quickly discovered that the aftermath of the showcase held consequences I had never anticipated. The following days were a whirlwind. People began to reach out, sharing their own stories of betrayal and loss. Many expressed gratitude for my courage to speak out, and it was obvious that my experience resonated with far more individuals than I had ever imagined. I felt a wave of responsibility wash over me. These weren't just my struggles anymore, they were ours. But as the virtual high faded, reality sank in. I anxiously checked my phone for messages, but then I did something I hadn't done in a while. I reached out to my old friends, the ones I had shunned in my darkness. I shared my recent triumph and asked for their support, not just in my art but in my journey toward healing. To my surprise, they responded with warmth and enthusiasm. We began to reconnect over coffee and late-night phone calls, and slowly but surely, I started to patch the fragments of my social life back together. However, as I engaged with my newfound community, I also found myself drawn back to thoughts of Mark. It was hard not to dwell on him amidst all the conversations about scams and betrayal. What was he doing? Was he still running his business with the same disregard for others? The darker thoughts that once clouded my mind returned, but now they served as fuel rather than a burden. Months later, I decided to check on Mark's business profile, curiosity gnawing at me. I was taken aback to find my reviews still visible, a testament to the ripple effect of my actions. The ratings had tanked, and it seemed as if he was struggling to stay afloat as clients were wary of his once charismatic facade. The realization struck me hard: I was affecting his life without needing to directly engage him. I didn't want to wish ill upon him, I realized revenge had never really been about him, it had always been about me, reclaiming my power. It dawned on me that I was no longer the same person who had wanted to inconvenience him out of spite. I was evolving, becoming stronger, and my art was now a testament to that growth. But the twist came when I received a message from Mark himself. My stomach dropped as I read his words, a mix of disbelief and surprise flooding my senses. "You're quite the artist," he wrote. "I didn't realize how talented you were until I saw your gallery. I'm sorry for how things went down between us. I've learned from my mistakes, and I hope you can forgive me." My initial impulse was to laugh at the audacity of it. But as I reread the message, I was struck by the vulnerability hidden beneath his words. It took some time for it was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. The kind of day that makes the world feel washed out and gray, the kind that almost begs for a cup of something warm and a cozy blanket. But, instead of snuggling up with a good book or curling into the comforting embrace of my well-worn couch, I was standing in the middle of my kitchen, staring at the lifeless shell of what used to be my marriage. The scent of burnt coffee hung heavy in the air, a bitter reminder of my failed attempts to hold it all together. Outside, the rain drummed against the window, a steady rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. I could hear the echo of laughter from the two people who had shattered my world just days before, my best friend, Sarah, and my husband, Jake. Irony had never tasted so bitter. The two of them, the very cornerstones of my life, had turned into the wrecking ball that tore down everything I had built with love and trust. I stood at the kitchen sink, the light from the window casting a dull glow over the faded tiles, their once bright colors now dulled by time and neglect. I could still see the heart-shaped stickers that my daughter, Mia, had placed on the cabinet doors when she was little, remnants of a happier time. My fingers traced the edges of those stickers, and the memory of her giggles stung like salt in a fresh wound. The betrayal had been swift and merciless. One day, I was making plans for a family vacation, envisioning sun-soaked days on the beach, and the next, I was unraveling the truth. They thought I was oblivious, that I was too wrapped up in my own world to notice the stolen glances, the whispered phone calls, the sudden distance between us. But I wasn't blind. I had just chosen to ignore the cracks in our facade, hoping they would heal instead of widen. With every step I took through our home, silent echoes of happier moments haunted me. I could hear Mia's laughter bouncing off the walls in the hallway, her little feet pattering down the stairs, but all of that felt like a lifetime ago, as if I belonged to another world entirely. Now, all I could feel was the weight of their betrayal pressing down on me, and I was teetering on the edge of something dark and dangerous. I couldn't just let this go, I owed it to myself, and to Mia, to fight back. As the rain continued to pour, drowning the world outside, I felt something stirring within me, a quiet resolve, a flicker of vengeance that I had never known I possessed. What would the best theoretical ideas be in this circumstance? I didn't know yet, but I was determined to find out. And I would make them pay, oh, how I would make them pay. The betrayal unfolded like a slow-motion train wreck, each revelation crashing into me with devastating clarity. It began innocently enough, or at least I'd convinced myself it was innocent. I remember those Friday nights when Jake would say he was heading out to meet the guys for drinks. I'd wave him off, slipping back into my routine of laundry and dinners, trusting him implicitly. After all, we had a solid marriage, or so I thought. My heart ached with the bittersweet memory of our wedding day, the smiles, the vows that felt like a promise sealed in gold. But as time wore on, the late nights became more frequent. There was a growing unease that fluttered in my stomach like a moth caught in a web. I'd catch him sneaking text on his phone, the light of the screen illuminating his face in the dark, the way he'd jump when I entered the room. "Just work stuff," he'd say dismissively. Yet, when I pressed him, searching for the truth, he'd wrap his arms around me, whisper sweet nothings that felt like a soothing balm but left bitter residue in my heart. And then there was Sarah. My closest confidant, a woman I'd shared every joy and sorrow with. I had always believed we could weather any storm together. But when I noticed the way she looked at Jake, the way her laughter lingered a bit too long in his presence, it felt like watching a slow burn, terrifying and mesmerizing at once. The whispers of suspicion grew louder, but the thought of them betraying me was simply too absurd to entertain. Each time I brushed aside the gnawing doubt, I felt a little more of my trust erode away, even as I was desperate to believe everything was fine. "You're imagining things," I'd tell myself. "You're being paranoid." The need for denial was like a lifeline, tethering me to the belief that my life wasn't crumbling around me. But deep down, I could feel the cracks spreading. I felt so naive, so blind, and the shame of my ignorance settled hard in my gut. How had I not seen it? How had I let it go this far? Then came the night I couldn't shake the feeling anymore. I remember standing at the sink, washing our daughter's favorite blue bowl, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize: "You should know what's been happening behind your back." My breath hitched, and I dropped the bowl, shattering the fragile ceramic into a million pieces, much like my heart. My thoughts spiraled, racing through all the moments I'd questioned but ignored, all the signs I'd brushed off as mere paranoia. The message felt like a slap to the face. I was gripped with confusion and disbelief. I could hardly breathe as I read and reread the words, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. Was this a cruel prank? A mistake? Or was it true? My mind raced through 100 scenarios, each more painful than the last, until I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah. After a few rings, her cheerful voice answered, a sound that now struck me like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Hey, what's up?" she chirped, and I could hear the background noise of laughter. My world narrowed down to her voice, each syllable twisting the knife deeper. The betrayal felt like a dark cloud, suffocating me with its weight. "Are you and Jake?" I couldn't even finish the question, but the silence stretched between us, brittle as glass, and I could hear the laughter in the background still churning like a storm, taunting me. Sarah hesitated, and in that moment, everything I thought I knew about our friendship began to unravel. "What do you mean?" she finally asked, her voice too sweet, too innocent. "Don't play coy with me, Sarah. You know exactly what I'm talking about," I bit out, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and despair. I needed to wake up from this nightmare, to shake off the impending doom that clung to me like a second skin. But as I waited for her response, a sickening feeling settled in my stomach. She wasn't surprised by my question. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, but I could hear the tremor in her voice, fear or guilt, I wasn't sure which. And just like that, sparks ignited within me, emotions swirling chaotically. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and more alone than I had ever felt in my life. That night, I lay awake, the shadows of doubt wrapping around me. My phone buzzed again, another text from the anonymous number: "You deserve the truth. They won't stop until they destroy you." Each word was a dagger, digging deeper, twisting with cold certainty that my life was spiraling beyond my control. I wanted to scream, to unleash the tidal wave of hurt that crashed over me, but I felt paralyzed. Days turned into a blur of despair. I went through the motions of my daily life, but inside, I was a ticking time bomb. I'd walk through the grocery store, smiling through clenched teeth while my heart raced at every corner, convinced I'd run into either of them. The aisles felt suffocating, every mundane item, a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, felt like a reminder of the life I was losing. Conversations with friends became a balancing act. They would say, "How are you and Jake?" And I'd plaster on a smile, my throat tightening at the lie. "We're great," I murmured, even as I felt my trust fraying at the seams. Every time someone brought him up, my insides twisted, anger bubbling just beneath the surface. It felt like I was wearing a mask, a facade that grew heavier by the day. Then came the moment of public humiliation that I thought would shatter me completely. It was a Friday evening, and a group of our mutual friends planned a casual gathering. I could feel the tension building within me all week, but a part of me clung to hope, that maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe I was overreacting. I convinced myself that seeing them together would reveal the truth, and I could finally put the pieces together. When I walked into the dimly lit bar, my heart raced. The laughter and chatter buzzed around me, but I felt like I was in a different world, a spectator to my own life. And there they were, Jake and Sarah, perched intimately close on a bar stool. Their bodies leaned into one another, sharing secrets and giggles, the sight igniting a fire of betrayal deep within me. I wished I could freeze time, to go back to that moment when trust still wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I was rooted to the spot. I felt small, invisible, as if the walls were closing in around me. In that moment, the weight of isolation crashed down on me as I stood there, paralyzed by the sight of my life unraveling before me. The anger that bubbled beneath the surface erupted with the force of a volcano. It was like a switch had flipped inside me, igniting a fire that I had never realized had been brewing all along. I was no longer the passive woman who had let love slip through her fingers, nor was I the naive friend who had trusted so deeply. In that instant, I became someone new, a person forged in betrayal, scorn, and heartache. I remember the clinking sound of glasses, the laughter that felt like daggers in my back, and the sight of Jake leaning toward Sarah, his eyes twinkling with a brightness that had once been reserved for me. My heart pounded in my chest, not with the pain of love lost, but with the fierce realization that I was done being their punching bag, their fool. I had always been the one to offer forgiveness, to give second chances, but as I watched them enjoy their little performance, a primal scream clawed up my throat, begging for release. What had been the final straw, you ask? I'll tell you. It was witnessing the flicker of affection they shared, something I had yearned for but had been deprived of. It was the thought that they believed I was too weak to fight back, too broken to stand up for myself. The truth crashed over me like the torrential rain outside, and I realized, I was not weak, I was simply untested, and now I was ready to break free from the chains they had unknowingly forged around me. As I turned away from the bar, my mind raced, devising a plan that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The betrayal had released a fierce warrior within me. I wouldn't just let this go, I would rise from the ashes of this heartbreak and show them that there were consequences for their actions. I wanted them to feel the weight of their choices, to recognize the damage they had caused, not just to me, but to my daughter, to our family. The realization ignited a cold fire in my veins. I didn't need to confront them now, the moment wasn't about anger or confrontation. No, I needed to be smart. I needed to strategize. The best theoretical ideas began to swirl in my mind like a storm, subtle, calculated revenge that would dismantle them piece by piece. I envisioned their future crumbling beneath the weight of their own deceit. I could see it clearly. Jake, the man who'd once vowed to love me, would come to understand the true meaning of betrayal. And Sarah, my so-called friend, would be forced to reckon with her choices. I returned home that night, the world around me still humming with life, but I was no longer part of it. Instead, I felt like a ghost, an observer in my own existence. I sat on the edge of my bed, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of clarity amidst the chaos. The rain continued to fall outside, beating rhythmically against the window as if it knew the storm that was brewing inside me. As I stared at the pale ceiling, I envisioned what I would do. I would gather evidence, photos, texts, anything that would shatter their world as they had shattered mine. I would twist their own lies into weapons against them, forcing them to confront the reality of their betrayal. They thought they could have it all without consequences, but they were about to learn how wrong they were. Mia's innocent laugh echoed in my ears, bringing me back to the reality of my decisions. The plan took shape like a carefully constructed puzzle, each piece sliding into place with an ominous sense of satisfaction. It wasn't about rage, it was about precision, about crafting a masterpiece of revenge that would leave them breathless and regretful. I would turn their own tactics against them, a game of chess where I intended to be several moves ahead. Here's how I envisioned the steps unfolding. I needed proof, solid evidence that couldn't be denied. I had always been observant, but now I would take it to a level I'd never dared before. Using social media, particularly Instagram and Facebook, I'd keep an eye on their posts, comments, and interactions. I'd create a fake account to follow them discreetly, lurking in the shadows as I gathered intel. I'd document their late-night rendezvous, especially those that were conspicuously timed with his supposed business trips. I'd keep a log of their interactions, noting every instance of flirtation or intimacy. My heart raced at the thought, but it was invigorating, like being a detective in my own life story. Next, I would plant the seeds of doubt in Jake's mind. I'd stage innocent conversations with mutual friends, subtly dropping hints about how people were noticing the chemistry between Jake and Sarah. "Isn't it funny how close they've gotten lately?" I'd say, feigning casualness. I needed him to realize that the facade wasn't as airtight as he thought. I wanted to create a ripple effect of insecurity that would set the stage for the drama to come. In the meantime, I would flirt with a few acquaintances of mine, ones Jake recognized but didn't take seriously. I had a couple of friends who could play this part for me. I'd invite them over for casual gatherings, ensuring that Jake would see me laughing and having fun with someone else. I wanted him to feel the weight of my potential departure, to realize that I was no longer the docile partner he could take for granted. Once I had sufficient evidence, the time would come to lay it all bare. I envisioned creating a digital dossier of their betrayal, screenshots of texts, candid photos of them together, and even messages from that anonymous tipper who had first shattered my world. On a rainy evening, reminiscent of the day everything changed, I would invite both Jake and Sarah over, under the guise of sorting things out. I could see them sitting on opposite ends of the couch, tension in the air as I adopted a calm facade, like a predator waiting for the right moment to pounce. My heart would race as I revealed the evidence, a series of slideshows, each one more damning than the last. I'd watch their expressions morph from confusion to horror, their faces paling as reality crashed down upon them. But I wouldn't stop there. It wasn't enough for them to simply feel guilty, I wanted them to suffer the consequences of their actions. I planned to send copies of the evidence to our closest friends, making sure they understood the depth of the betrayal. Jake would lose not just me, but the respect of those he had lied to, and I wanted them to witness his downfall firsthand. I'd imagine the phone calls in the following days, the whispers, and the awkward encounters at social gatherings. I wanted my revenge to be a spectacle, a public unraveling of the day arrived. I felt the air crackle with electric tension, heavy, like the storm clouds that loomed over my home. I had invited them both under the guise of wanting to talk, to mend the wreckage, seeking clarity. As I prepared for their arrival, I felt a mix of anxiety and exhilaration, a predator ready to reveal its trap. When the doorbell rang, my heart thundered. I opened the door with a calmness I didn't quite feel, masking the storm raging inside me. Jake stood with that familiar charming smile, his eyes momentarily brightening before he caught my expression. Sarah stood beside him, her laughter faltering as she realized something was off. The tension between us was palpable, a fraying thread about to snap. "Hey, thanks for coming," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the fury bubbling below the surface. I ushered them inside, forcing a smile that felt more like a snarl. They settled on the couch, an awkward distance between them, a chasm they didn't yet understand. "Is everything okay?" Jake asked, concern clouding his features. His brow furrowed slightly, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind, trying to decipher the invitation's true intent. "Perfectly fine, actually," I replied, my lips curling into a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I've just been doing some thinking. About us." I motioned to the coffee table where I had neatly arranged a stack of printed screenshots and photos like trophies displaying their sins. Their eyes followed mine, and I could see the color drain from Jake's face, recognition dawning too late. "What's this?" Sarah asked, her voice sharp, laced with a hint of panic. "It's what you think it is," I said, my voice dripping with cold certainty. I picked up the first piece of evidence, a photo of them laughing together at a bar, the very moment I had become a ghost in my own life. "You see, I've been gathering some information. It turns out that while I was at home, you two were busy painting a very different picture." Jake swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" He shifted in his seat, and I could see him trying to find the right words, but they eluded him like a child caught stealing cookies from a jar. I slid the photo across the table toward him, watching as realization washed over his face. "That's the night you told me you were working late. Isn't that funny?" I leaned in slightly, my voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "You lied to me, right to my face." Sarah, realizing the game had changed, turned pale. "It's not what it looks like," she exclaimed, her bravado slipping. "Really?" I replied, tilting my head. "So it wasn't you two sharing a laugh, sharing a connection? Because I have more. Much more." With deliberate slowness, I unveiled the next piece of evidence, a text message exchange between them. The words felt like knives, sharp and unforgiving. "I can't wait to be with you," I read aloud, my voice steady as I met Jake's shocked gaze. "And this one, you make me feel alive again. Remember that." I wonder how it'd feel for Mia to read these words one day. With each revelation, I could see the disbelief morph into horror on their faces. Jake's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, each word he attempted to form crumbling to dust before it could escape. Sarah's the fallout was as spectacular as I had envisioned, but nothing could have prepared me for how the aftermath would unravel. The initial shock on their faces transformed into a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, desperation, and eventually, anger. But it was a different kind of anger, it felt like the kind of desperation that comes from being cornered, and I relished every moment of it. Jake sat there, mouth agape, trying to string together a defense that was destined for failure. "You don't understand," he stammered, his bravado crumbling. "It was a mistake." I leaned forward, my heart racing with adrenaline. "A mistake? Or a choice you made daily? You think I'm going to let you wiggle your way out of this?" My voice was calm, almost too calm, as I savored the power that coursed through me. Sarah, her face pale and defensive, attempted to interject. "You're overreacting. We didn't mean for it to happen." But I could see the cracks forming in her confidence, her eyes darting between Jake and me, searching for an escape that wasn't there. "Overreacting?" I echoed, disbelief twisting my features. "You invaded my life, my family, and you think I'm overreacting? You took everything I held dear and shredded it. You don't get to call the shots anymore." The moment hung heavy in the air, tension crackling like static. I watched as Jake's facade disintegrated, revealing a man who had made choices that now loomed over him like a dark cloud. After the confrontation, they stumbled back into their lives, but everything had changed. The seeds of doubt I had planted bloomed into full-blown distrust in their relationship. Mutual friends began to distance themselves, unsure of where their loyalties lay. The whispers of betrayal echoed in every corner of our community, a chorus that sang of their downfall. I felt a sense of satisfaction, but it evaporated quickly, replaced by the reality of what I'd wrought. The more I watched them suffer, the more hollow it felt. I had wanted justice, but what I received was the slow, painful realization that revenge was a double-edged sword. My triumph over them became an echoing void that left me feeling strangely empty. Jake moved out shortly after the confrontation, leaving behind a home filled with memories that now felt tainted. A part of me had hoped that this act of vengeance would lead to closure, a sense of reclamation of my life. But instead, I was left staring at the remnants of what had been, a crumbling marriage, a fractured friendship, and a daughter who deserved none of this chaos. Mia, sweet and innocent, bore the brunt of our decisions. I watched her play in the remnants of our once happy home, her laughter now tinged with confusion and uncertainty. The world she had known was crumbling beneath her, and I felt helpless as I tried to shield her from the storm of adult emotions swirling around us. The more I distanced myself from Jake and Sarah, the more I realized that I had created a rift that couldn't be easily repaired. Our friends whispered about the scandal over coffee, tensions ran high in social circles, and I became a topic of discussion rather than a participant in life as I had once known it. I had set fire to my own world in the pursuit of vengeance, and the flames were spreading faster than I could contain them. Jake tried to reach out, sending messages filled with apologies that felt like salt on a raw wound. "I'm sorry."
You know that feeling when your gut twists in knots, and you can almost taste the bitterness lingering in your mouth? That's what it felt like every time I walked past my kitchen window, taking in the quiet suburb where I'd once felt safe. A neighborhood that had turned into the backdrop of the most painful chapter of my life. The sun would dip below the horizon, casting long shadows that fell like a shroud over my home, and with it came the memories, the sweet, syrupy ones that turned sour the moment I remembered the betrayal that had shattered it all. My name is Ella, and I've lived in this quaint little house for 5 years. It's the kind of place where neighbors wave as they walk their golden retrievers, and children ride bicycles giggling down the street. But what once felt like a sanctuary became a cage filled with echoes of laughter that no longer belonged to me. The key players in this story? Let's start with my husband, Mark. At first glance, he was everything I ever wanted, charming, ambitious, and with a smile that could light up the darkest room. But as I've learned, sometimes the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. And then there was Lily, his best friend. She was the type of woman who could walk into a room and instantly draw everyone's attention. Her laughter was infectious, her beauty mesmerizing. I had once admired her, but now, she was the specter that haunted my dreams. It started innocently enough, the kind of mundane lies that slip through the cracks of a relationship. Late nights at work, casual mentions of meetings that never took place. But I was too blinded by love, or perhaps, too naive, to see the fissures growing beneath the surface. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a message on Mark's phone, a simple "can't wait to see you tonight," that the walls of my world began to tremble. In that moment, a chill ran down my spine, the kind that makes you want to turn away but keeps you locked in place, helpless and horrified. As I read those words, I felt them pierce me deeper than any knife ever could. My heart thudded loudly in my chest, drowning out the distant sounds of laughter from the street outside, sounds that felt like a cruel joke at my expense. That night, as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I could almost hear the whispers of my own despair mingling with the scent of betrayal that lingered in the air. The emotional turmoil churned in my stomach, rising like bile, and I realized then that I was no longer the victim in this twisted play of love and treachery. No, the time had come for me to serve a cold dish of revenge, one that would not only settle the score but perhaps lay waste to the very foundations of the lives they had built on lies. Something ominous loomed ahead, and I could feel it wrapping around me like a tight embrace, whispering that the storm was just beginning. And as I wrestled with the choices I had to make, a deep, simmering anticipation grew within me, turning that bitterness into something darker, something that demanded satisfaction. I was ready to reclaim my life, and they would not see it coming. The days that followed were a blur, each one stretching and contracting in a dance of disbelief and anger. My heart raced at the slightest thought of what I had discovered, the very air around me felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. For a while, I clung to the hope that I was misreading things, that Mark wouldn't dare betray me, yet, deep down, I knew the truth. It gnawed at me, pulling me under like a relentless tide. I wanted to confront him, to shake the truth out of him like a dog with a bone, but every time I opened my mouth, the words evaporated. Instead, I found myself slipping into a routine that felt foreign, a facade of normalcy that saw me laughing and smiling as if everything were all right. But inside, the turmoil was festering, growing like a cancer that threatened to overtake me. Every evening, I masked my fury while cooking dinner, the aromas wafting through my kitchen like some sickly sweet veneer over the bitterness eating away at my soul. Meanwhile, my mind would drift, twisting and turning through the memories of our life together. I could almost hear the echoes of us, laughing on the couch, sharing dreams under the stars, the promises that felt unbreakable. Each memory now felt like a knife, sharp and merciless, slicing through the fabric of my trust. Then came the day I crossed that line. It was a rainy Tuesday, with clouds heavy enough to burst at any moment. Mark was late coming home from work again, and I decided to take a drive to clear my head. As I pulled up to Lily's house, I thought of how often she had been in ours, laughing over dinner and sharing glasses of wine. I remember thinking she was family, someone I could rely on. The irony stung like a fresh wound. What I saw through the window of her living room turned my insides to ice. Mark, laughing, his face alive in a way I hadn't seen in months, and Lily, her fingers dancing along his arm like they were orchestrating a symphony of betrayal. It was an image seared into my mind, a grotesque painting of everything I held dear, splattered with treachery. In that moment, all the air was sucked from my lungs, and I felt swallowed by an overwhelming wave of grief and rage. I could feel the tears pooling in my eyes, blurring my vision, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I embraced the anger, let it wash over me like a cleansing flame. How could he? I thought, each repetition of the phrase like a pulse in my temples. How could she? The betrayal wasn't just from him, it was from the woman I had considered a friend. They had built a world so seamless, so intricate, that it made my heart ache with a pain I had never known. As I drove home, the rain poured down, mirroring the chaos inside me. I stewed in my thoughts, retracing my steps, trying to piece together the moments that led up to this. The late nights that turned into excuses, the missed calls and secretive glances. I grappled with disbelief, anger, and that sinking sadness that comes from feeling utterly alone. And yet, amidst the turmoil, a seed of resolve began to sprout within me. The thought of confronting them felt like a trap, one where I would only serve as the pitiful victim. No, I would not let them see me cry. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing the full extent of the pain they had caused. Each moment I considered my next move, a new wave of humiliation crashed over me, forcing me deeper into isolation. The days turned into weeks, and my emotional state spiraled. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting the spaces I once filled with joy. Friends began to notice my absence. Invitations to gatherings trickled away, and the phone calls diminished. How could they understand the monstrous betrayal that was suffocating me? I felt like an imposter, masking my grief under a veneer of politeness, and the more I faked my joy, the more I isolated myself from everyone I cared about. One afternoon, I ran into my neighbor, Claire. She was sipping coffee on her porch, her golden retriever snoozing at her feet. She waved me over, concern etching her brow when I sat down. "Ella, you haven't been yourself lately. Is everything okay?" The question floated in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to scream the truth but instead found myself nodding and muttering something about work stress. I could see the doubt flicker in her eyes, the urge to dig deeper. But I couldn't bear the idea of unearthing my pain so publicly. I forced a smile, but it felt like a mask slipping further down my face. And so, I continued to wear my disguise, but I could feel the weight of secrecy pressing down on me. One night, I decided to confront Mark about my suspicions, believing that maybe I could regain some semblance of my old life by demanding the truth. "Mark," I said, my voice trembling as I sat across from him at the dinner table, the tension thick enough to slice with a knife. "I found a message on your phone." I watched the way his expression shifted, the flicker of fear in his eyes. For a moment, I thought I might see guilt wash over him, but he quickly masked it with irritation. "It's nothing, Ella. Why can't you just trust me?" he snapped, his tone harsh and dismissive. I felt my heart sink. The arrogance in his voice made me feel small, belittled for my pain. Instead of owning up, he twisted the narrative, making me feel like the offender. I was left grappling with the revelation that he had turned my love into a weapon against me. "Do you really expect me to trust you after everything?" I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. In that moment, I was no longer Ella, I was a stranger confronting the man I thought I knew. We argued for hours, and by the time we were done, I was left with a hollow silence and a raging storm of disbelief. Yet, the isolation seeped in, Mark's outrage had turned into contempt, and I felt utterly alone. No one could rescue me from his anger. It was another layer of betrayal that I hadn't anticipated. As days turned into dark nights, I stumbled upon more clues that drove the nail of despair even deeper. It was a Saturday when I discovered the last nail in the coffin, an offhand comment from one of Mark's colleagues at a barbecue I reluctantly attended. "Enjoying your new place with Lily?" he said, a playful grin plastered across his face. I froze. The laughter that followed felt like shards of glass cutting through my heart. I stood there, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks as humiliation flooded my senses. The world around me dulled, and I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears, drowning out the cheers and clinks of beer bottles. Suddenly, everyone was staring. I drove home that evening, the engine's growl drowning out the storm raging within me. Each bump in the road felt like the universe mocking my anguish as I replayed the words in my mind. "Enjoying your new place with Lily?" It was as if I had been handed a blade, sharp and glinting, ready to cut my heart out and leave it for the crows. The anger simmered beneath my skin, igniting a fire I hadn't realized was there. Sitting in my driveway, I stared at the familiar side of my home, the sanctuary that had, unbeknownst to me, turned into a battleground. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles whitening as the reality of my situation slammed into me like a tidal wave. I was not merely a bystander in my own life, I was the fool. The final straw had been laid bare, stark and unbearable. Mark and Lily had twisted the knife deep enough to sever the bonds of our relationship, and as I sat there, that realization morphed into something potent, a mixture of rage and clarity. I had spent weeks wallowing in despair, hoping for something that no longer existed. A flicker of courage ignited within me. It was a whisper that told me I didn't have to be a victim anymore. As I stepped into the house, the air felt charged, thick with betrayal. My mind raced with thoughts of what I could do. I had always been the calm one, the one who believed in understanding and forgiveness. But now I was on the brink of embracing my darker side, the side that yearned for justice, however twisted it might be. I felt untethered, like a marionette with its strings cut, free to enact a plan that had been simmering beneath the surface. Ideas began to flood my mind, chaotic yet strangely comforting. My heart raced as I visualized the steps I could take, how I could orchestrate my revenge without them seeing it coming. What would be the perfect retribution for a betrayal of this magnitude? I replayed the moments of their laughter, their intimacy, and with every mental image, my resolve hardened. I thought of the weekends I spent organizing surprise parties for Mark, the countless hours I spent planning dinners for friends, a life I had built for them both. I had infused love into every corner of our home, every shared experience, every plan for the future. And now, it felt like every ounce of that love was a weapon I could wield against them. My fingers brushed the counter in the kitchen, where we had shared countless meals, where laughter had once filled the silence. I imagined it all collapsing, turning their joy into chaos, shattering the very foundation of the lives they had constructed on my heartbreak. But this wouldn't be mindless destruction. I wanted them to feel every ounce of despair that I felt. I wanted them to understand that betrayal comes at a cost, and I was more than willing to extract that price. My mind raced with ideas, the first tendrils of a meticulous plan weaving themselves together. The turning point wasn't just my discovery of their betrayal, nor was it the anger that boiled over after that barbecue. No, it was the moment when I realized I could take back my power. I could no longer be the passive participant in this tragic play. As I stood alone in my kitchen, the bittersweet taste of vengeance mingled with the remnants of my love, and for the first time in months, I felt alive. My heart was a storm, fierce and relentless, but it was a storm I would channel. I would know. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what lay ahead settle over my shoulders like an old, familiar cloak. I was ready to meticulously craft my revenge, a dish served cold and with a side of poetic justice. I opened my laptop and began to outline my plan step by step, letting the adrenaline fuel my creativity. The first phase of my plan was all about information. I needed to know everything about their schedules, their routines, and who they confided in. That meant becoming the invisible observer in their lives. I knew Mark's phone was my best resource. I couldn't hack it, but I was adept at understanding his habits. So, I began with the basics, tracking his whereabouts on social media. I created a fake account on Instagram and started following Mark's friends, particularly those who routinely shared updates about their lives. I figured out their game nights, gym schedules, and everything else I needed to know to weave my way into their social fabric seamlessly. I reached out to Claire, my neighbor who had never suspected anything was amiss. I shared a fabricated story about needing help organizing a surprise birthday party for Mark. I framed it as an act of goodwill to help repair my relationship with him. Claire, being the sweet, unsuspecting soul she was eager to help and agreed to join forces. In her eagerness, she even suggested inviting Lily, thinking it would be a great way to mend fences among friends. I suppressed a smile at the irony, knowing this was going to be a crucial part of my plan. With Claire's help, I could draw them into a situation that would ultimately serve my purpose. I set the date for the party, and with Claire's assistance, I meticulously planned every detail. I chose a local venue that was beautiful yet intimate and emotional, setting where whispers could float and laughter could mask deeper truths. The invites went out, and as guests began to accept, I felt a sense of control returning to my life. What I needed now was the perfect distraction for Mark and Lily. So, I crafted a series of side events, games that required teamwork, allowing them to rely on one another and further deepen the bond they had so callously torn from me. I could almost hear the whispers of betrayal echoing in the back of my mind, and each step closer to the big day felt like an electric charge pulsing through me. The pièce de résistance would be the cake, a stunning, multi-layered confection that would serve as a metaphor for my revenge. With my culinary skills honed over the years, I decided to bake the cake myself using a mix of flavors Mark loved. But the twist. Inside the cake, I would hide a small, tasteful message written on edible paper. As they cut the cake, it would reveal the truth about me discovering their affair, something that would catch them totally off guard. The message would read, "Happy birthday, Mark. Let's celebrate the lies you've built your life on." The night of the party arrived, and as I stood in the venue surrounded by friends and acquaintances, I could feel the simmer of excitement and anxiety in my stomach. Mark was oblivious, enjoying the attention like the narcissist he was, while Lily basked in the glow of her deception, unaware of the trap that was closing in around her. As the night unfolded, I orchestrated moments the evening unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance. Laughter echoed in the venue, mingling with the sweet scent of cake and the soft hum of chatter. It was a celebration, one that I had meticulously crafted, and yet, it felt like the calm before the storm. Mark beamed under the dim lights, completely oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Lily, radiant as ever, flitted around the room like a butterfly, her laughter spilling like warm honey over the crowd. It sickened me. Every smile, every flirtatious quip they exchanged felt like daggers aimed at my heart. The cake stood at the center of the room, a glorious masterpiece draped in delicate icing. It was beautiful, and yet, I could feel the energy swirling around it, heavy, electric, pregnant with anticipation. I watched as the moments ticked by, my heart thumping in rhythm with the beat of my resentment. Finally, I clapped my hands, drawing everyone's attention. "All right, everyone. It's time for the big moment," I announced, my voice steady, though inside, I was trembling with a rush of adrenaline. Mark turned to me, his eyes alight with genuine excitement. "What do you have for me?" he asked, a childlike eagerness etched across his face. How could he be so blissfully ignorant? I gestured toward the cake, and cheers erupted from the crowd. Everyone gathered around, forming a semicircle as I moved to the side, a silent conductor guiding the symphony of my revenge. "Make a wish." I urged him, my eyes fixed on Lily, who stood to the side, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. There was something deliciously satisfying in watching her smile falter for just a second. Mark closed his eyes, and as he blew out the candles, I felt the tension knot tighter in my chest. He leaned forward, grasping the knife, and I held my breath, waiting for the moment the truth would slice through his delusion like a hot knife through butter. He cut into the cake, and a hush fell over the room. I could almost hear the collective intake of breath. As the first piece came free, the hidden note nestled within began to surface. My heart raced. I could see Mark's smile falter, confusion knitting his brows as the words gradually came into view. "What's this?" he asked, holding the piece in midair, the laughter from earlier dissipating into an uneasy silence. I watched as the crowd leaned in, curiosity etched into their expressions. The room felt electric, every face turned toward the revelation unfolding before them. In that moment, the edginess of the situation caught up with me. I felt exhilarated and terrified all at once, riding the razor's edge of vindication. Mark unfolded the note, his gaze darting between the paper and my face. "Ella, what is this?" His voice was barely above a whisper, a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. The room waited with bated breath, witnessing the unraveling of everything they believed to be true. "Happy birthday, Mark. Let's celebrate the lies you've built your life on." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, thick with betrayal. Gasps echoed around the gathering as realization dawned on the others, their eyes shifting from Mark to Lily. I watched as her face drained of color, the facade slipping away like a mask discarded. Mark looked up from the note, his eyes wide and uncomprehending. "What?" How did the silence that followed my revelation was deafening? In that moment, the room transformed into a stage of disbelief and betrayal, as each guest processed the sharp words that shattered the illusion Mark had built. I could see the weight of the situation settling on their shoulders, the fun and laughter replaced by a creeping unease. Mark's face morphed from confusion to anger in the blink of an eye. He looked at me, eyes blazing with fury, but it was the betrayal he felt, the realization that I had been one step ahead all along, that painted his expression with shades of panic. "You did this." His voice was an echo of the man I once loved, but now it felt foreign and cold, a remnant of the relationship that had died the moment he let Lily into our lives. The laughter from earlier felt like a distant memory, and in its place was the weight of truth, the kind that can only reveal itself through moments of stark clarity. Claire, who had been standing beside me, gasped, her eyes darting from Mark to me, then back again. "Ella, is this true? Did you know?" Her confusion was palpable. She had been my ally in this treacherous game, and her loyalty hung in the balance. "I knew," I responded, my voice steady even as my heart raced. I felt liberated, the shackles of shame and hurt falling away like dead leaves. And I wanted him to know that I'm not the fool he thought I was. The guests began to murmur amongst themselves, whispers spiraling through the crowd like a wildfire. The reality of the affair was settling in, and I could see the judgment in their eyes. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with condemnation, and I realized then that I had become a pariah in my own social circle. Yet, amid that realization, there was an undeniable sense of power coursing through me. Lily's facade crumbled as she grappled with the fallout, her confident demeanor replaced by panic. She tried to laugh it off, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "It's not what you think, Ella. We were just what?" I interrupted, relishing the power that came from peeling back the layers of her lies. "Living in the shadows of my trust? Is that how you view our friendship? As an opportunity for betrayal?" Mark shot her a look of disbelief, and I could see the betrayal etched across his face. "You told me it was nothing," he spat, venom dripping from his words. The disgust in his voice was tangible, and I felt a twisted satisfaction at the unraveling of their bond. As the scene unfolded, I watched the room fracture. Friends who had once rallied around the couple looked on, some already shuffling away from the calamity that had erupted. The whispers grew louder, and the air thickened with tension as the reality set in. This betrayal wasn't just my story, it was theirs too. I stepped back, allowing the chaos to swell around me like a tempest. I felt a pang of guilt for the lives I was upending, Claire's confusion, the awkward glances from acquaintances I once called friends. But that guilt was eclipsed by the satisfaction of having regained control over my narrative. In the days that followed, the fallout continued like ripples in a pond. Mark and Lily were ostracized, their tight-knit circle unraveling in whispers of betrayal. The same friends who had once laughed with them now distanced themselves, finds themselves caught in the web of deceit they had spun. Invitations to gatherings dried up.
Hey everyone. My name is Joanna, and I feel like I need to share my story, a confession, if you will. What started as a seemingly harmless neighborhood dispute turned into a twisted tale of betrayal, anger, and, ultimately, revenge. If you're listening, I hope it serves as a reminder of how quickly things can escalate, and the lengths we go to stand up for the ones we love. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, one of those picture-perfect places where the grass is always manicured, children run freely on the sidewalks, and the smell of freshly baked cookies drifts through the air during the holidays. It was the kind of place where people waved hello to each other, or at least they did, up until last summer. My mom, an unwaveringly kind and gentle woman, has lived in this house for over 20 years. She worked tirelessly to provide for me as a single parent, pouring her heart and soul into making our home a sanctuary. Then there's our neighbor, Greg. He moved in a couple of years ago, and at first, I thought he was just a typical guy trying to fit into the neighborhood. But as I got to know him, I realized he was anything but ordinary. Greg is loud, brash, and, frankly, incredibly rude. He seems to thrive on confrontation, always looking for an argument, always trying to exert his dominance. And trust me, he made it clear that he had no respect for anyone around him, especially my mom. The catalyst for everything that happened came on a sunny afternoon in June. I remember it vividly because the sun shone brightly through the kitchen window as my mom and I prepared lunch together, laughing between slices of fresh avocado and whole grain bread. The smell of the garden roses wafted in, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. But then, Greg decided to take his trash out, and what followed turned our world upside down. I don't know what went wrong that day. Maybe it was the way my mom had parked her car slightly askew in our driveway. But whatever the reason, Greg stormed over, his face twisted with irritation. I watched from the kitchen as he got in her face, and I'll never forget the way my mom's smile faltered, her eyes widening in confusion at the venom in his voice. "Why don't you go F yourself, Karen?" He spat, the words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. My heart raced as I witnessed this interaction. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. How dare he speak to her like that? My mom had always told me to take the high road, to rise above pettiness. But in that moment, all I wanted was to protect her. To lash out, to scream at him to get back into his bubble of a house and shut the hell up. But I didn't. I stood frozen, feeling the fire of injustice ignite inside me. That's when I knew I couldn't just let this go. It wasn't just a simple neighborhood squabble anymore. This was a deeper wound, a call to action. And in my heart, I started plotting my revenge, crafting a plan that would show Greg just how wrong he was to mess with my mom, and ultimately, with me. So, buckle up, because what I'm about to share is not just a story about retaliation, it's a deep dive into the chaos of emotions that come with standing up for your loved ones. Remember, sometimes the decision to fight back can change everything. As I watched Greg's face contort with rage, a familiar anger bubbled up inside me. It was suffocating, like a thick fog that made it difficult to think clearly. My mother, the embodiment of grace, deserved better than this. I could see how hard she was trying to keep her composure. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped them on her apron. I wanted to rush in, to shield her from his tirade, but instead, I stood there, paralyzed by a mix of disbelief and fury. "Why are you even talking to me like that?" Mom asked, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "This is my home, and I'm not doing anything wrong." To my horror, Greg laughed, a deep, mocking sound that echoed off the walls of our home. "Your home? Spare me. You think this is your territory? You don't even know how to park a car. You need to listen to someone who knows how to keep a neighborhood running." It felt like a slap in the face. I'd always been proud of my mom's caring spirit. She volunteered at the local shelter, hosted block parties, and always greeted her neighbors with a warm smile. And now, here was Greg, belittling her in public without a shred of remorse. I wanted to scream, to tell him that my mom was the heart of our community, not some nuisance. But I stayed silent, trapped in my own rage. Greg continued his tirade, spewing insults that cut deeper than I could have imagined. "You're just some washed-up loser pretending to be a saint. You're a joke, a pathetic little Karen that everyone laughs at behind your back." That was it. It was as if I had been waiting for the dam to break, and his words were the final straw. I could see my mother's face turn pale, her eyes welling with unshed tears that I was desperate to wipe away. I felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce urge to shield her from the wickedness of his words. It was like a switch flipped in me. I finally found my voice, though it wavered with the intensity of my emotion. "Greg, why don't you just get the hell out of here?" I shouted, stepping into the light. "You don't get to treat people like this. You don't get to talk to her like that." His gaze swung toward me, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw surprise flicker across his face, quickly replaced by that familiar smirk. "Oh, great. The little daughter wants to play hero. How cute. You think you can protect her?" Looking back, I realized that my attempt to defend my mom only fueled the fire. The confrontation escalated quickly, Greg hurling more insults, and I matching each one with words of my own. It felt like a scene out of a movie, raw and surreal, but it was very real to me. My mom stood to the side, looking devastated, a woman caught in the crossfire of a battle she never wanted to fight. Tension filled the air, a taut string ready to snap. Finally, Greg turned on his heel, a satisfied grin plastered across his face, as if he'd just crushed our spirits. "You think you can just play the victim, don't you? Good luck with that," he called back, his laughter ringing in my ears like a curse. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just about the insults thrown. It was the sheer disregard he had for my mother, an honorable woman who deserved respect, not disdain. The betrayal sank deeper than I could have imagined, it morphed into something darker. I felt it twist in my gut, a hunger for revenge. I retreated back into the house, my heart racing. I could feel my mom's eyes on me, a mix of empathy and concern. "Joanna, please don't let this get to you," she said softly, her voice shaky. But I couldn't help it. The anger and humiliation festered inside me like a relentless storm. That evening, as the sun slipped beneath the horizon, I sat on my bed, the weight of Greg's words echoing in my mind. I imagined the look on his face when I would make him regret ever crossing paths with my family. I began to formulate a plan, an intricate scheme that would turn the tables on him, that would remind him that words have consequences. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming our dignity. And I was going to show Greg that messing with my mom was the worst mistake he could have ever made. The fire inside me began to burn brighter, fueling the determination that would soon set my plan into motion. And so it began, the countdown to my revenge. The spark of injustice ignited it. The following weeks felt like a slow descent into chaos, each day amplifying the tension that hung in our neighborhood like dark clouds before a storm. Every time I saw Greg's face, the embarrassment and anger from that fateful day came rushing back. I could hardly focus on anything else, my entire world narrowed down to thoughts of revenge and how to reclaim our dignity. It started subtly. I would notice Greg glaring at my mom when he thought she wasn't looking, or muttering under his breath whenever she walked by. It was like he relished the power he had over her, a power I was determined to strip away. One afternoon, I caught him tossing his trash into our yard as he walked by, a smirk plastered across his face, as if to say, "What are you going to do about it?" I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just about his verbal assault anymore, he was taunting us, and every act of defiance chipped away at my mom's spirit. She would come inside after an interaction with him, shoulders slumped, her smile a shadow of its former self. I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of what he might do next, how far his cruelty would go. And then it happened, the final straw that ignited the fury burning inside me. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, the phone rang. My mom answered, her expression changing to one of confusion. I strained to hear her side of the conversation. "What do you mean, a noise complaint?" "No, we haven't been loud at all." "Yes, I understand, but..." I felt the blood drain from my face. It was the local police. Greg had called in a complaint against us, claiming we threw rowdy parties that disrupted the peace. My mom's voice trembled as she pleaded her innocence, trying to explain how we were just a quiet family who had never caused any trouble. But I could see the defeat in her eyes as she hung up the phone. Greg was using the system against us, weaponizing his anger. The thought of him enjoying every moment of our distress pushed me over the edge. I felt like a volcano ready to erupt, and I needed to act. I began to outline my plan, a series of calculated moves that would flip the script on Greg. I decided to play a long game, one that would not only expose him but also embarrass him in front of the entire neighborhood. I began gathering intel on him, piecing together the puzzle of his life. I learned that he had a dog, a notoriously loud and obnoxious bulldog named Spike that seemed to have been bred for chaos. I watched as he would leave Spike outside for hours, the poor creature barking incessantly, disturbing the entire block. That's when inspiration struck. I quietly began to unsettle the foundations of Greg's carefully constructed facade. I'd go to the local dog park, making sure to mention to fellow dog owners how Greg's dog was a nuisance, how he was always barking, and how Greg never seemed to care. It didn't take long for the whispers to spread through the neighborhood. Soon, I was hearing murmurs, people commenting on Greg's lack of responsibility as a pet owner. It gained momentum, a tiny snowball rolling down the hill, growing larger with each passing day. I could see the discontent in the eyes of our neighbors as they exchanged stories about Greg's dog in hushed tones. I also discreetly started documenting everything. I installed a few cameras around our home, capturing Greg's antics when he thought no one was watching. Videos of him yelling at Spike, cursing at the mailman, and even throwing trash onto our lawn. Every clip I collected added fuel to the fire of my plan. I knew I'd use that footage when the time was right, turning the neighborhood against him like he had tried to turn us against one another. But the situation escalated even further when Greg retaliated against my growing influence in the neighborhood. Suddenly, our driveway was no longer just a minor inconvenience, it became his focal point for drama. He called the city on us for zoning violations, claiming my mom's garden was an eyesore and a hazard. The doorbell rang one afternoon, and a city inspector stood on our porch, clipboard in hand, ready to critique my mother's pride and joy. "Your neighbor has filed a complaint about your garden," he said, looking uncomfortable. "I'm here to inspect it for potential violations." I felt the heat rise within me, ready to unleash. This wasn't just about my mom's garden anymore, it was an attack on her spirit, her happiness. I watched as the inspector walked through our yard, jotting down notes, and each click of his pen felt as though it was carving a deeper wound in my heart. The inspector was polite, but his demeanor was serious, and I could tell he was trying to remain impartial. My mom stood beside me, her face pale as she watched her beloved garden, a sanctuary she'd nurtured for years, come under scrutiny. As if sensing the tension, Greg leaned against his fence, arms crossed with a smug look on his face. I could see the satisfaction in his eyes, a gleam that said he had won. In that moment, everything crystallized for me. I felt a switch flip in my mind, a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating. I could no longer just sit back and let him tear my mother down. It was time to put my plan into immediate action, no more passive-aggressive tactics. This was about reclaiming our space and our peace of mind. The revenge I had been plotting was no longer a mere thought, it had morphed into a mission, and I was ready to fight for my mom, for our home. After the inspector left, I sat down at my laptop, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I crafted a detailed plan. The first step? Rallying support from our neighbors, those who were also fed up with Greg's antics. I knew they existed. I had overheard enough conversations at the dog park and during grocery runs to realize I wasn't alone in my disdain for his behavior. I created a private group on social media, inviting those who'd shared their frustrations about Greg. It was a small yet significant step, but the reactions were immediate and overwhelming. Soon the group was filling up with messages of support, people sharing their own stories about how Greg had mistreated them or their property. I could feel the energy building, and it fueled my determination. Next, I gathered the evidence I had collected over the weeks, videos of Greg's dog barking incessantly, clips of him arguing with neighbors, fighting with the mailman, and even littering. I was building a case, a digital dossier of sorts, to present to everyone who would listen. I wanted to expose him for who he really was, a bully hiding behind a facade of authority, and I was going to make sure he was held accountable. It was during one particularly heated neighborhood meeting that my plan reached its peak. The topic arose about Greg's complaints against various families, and I saw my opportunity. I stepped up, shaking with adrenaline but resolved. "I have something to share," I announced, grabbing everyone's attention. As I played the clips from my phone, there was a palpable shift in the room. Gasps filled the air as my neighbors watched Greg's outbursts, his disregard for property lines, and the chaos he unleashed on all of us. I saw heads nodding, expressions changing from disbelief to anger. I took a deep breath, trying to harness the nervous energy swirling inside me. Greg has been bullying us for too long, I asserted, my voice steady, emboldened by the support of everyone around me. He's been using petty complaints to scare us and control us, but we are stronger than that. We need to stand together. Let's show him that we refuse to be intimidated anymore. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The moment I finished speaking, a wave of murmurs swept through the room. Neighbors began to nod and share their own experiences, each story adding fuel to a fire I'd started. A few brave souls even spoke up, echoing my sentiments. He made a comment about my garden too. I caught him throwing trash into my yard last month. My kids are afraid to play outside because of his dog. It felt like the dam had finally burst, and in that moment, I could see the shift in momentum. Greg was no longer the untouchable bully, he was becoming the neighborhood pariah. And then, I saw him, standing at the back of the room, his face a mask of rage as he clutched the doorframe. The realization hit me like a shockwave, I had turned the tide. The power was slipping from his grasp, and he was losing control. In that instant, I knew this was just the beginning. I had ignited a movement, a coalition of neighbors united against one man's cruelty. I was determined to ensure that Greg would not only regret the words he had hurled at my mother but also the way he treated every single one of us. As we concluded the meeting, I felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had found my purpose in this fight, my pursuit of justice for my mom and our community. The fear that had once gripped me now transformed into a fierce resolve. The next phase of my plan was already forming in my mind, my strategy evolving with as the meeting adjourned. I felt a surge of adrenaline and a sense of clarity wash over me. It was no longer just about my mom and her dignity, it was about sending a message to Greg and reclaiming our sense of community. I had ignited a spark, and now it was time to fan it into a roaring fire. My plan had several key components, each carefully structured to ensure maximum impact. I wanted to make Greg feel the consequences of his actions, not just from my family but from the entire neighborhood. Here's how I mapped it out. 1. Building a coalition. The first step was to solidify the support I had gained during the meeting. I reached out to my neighbors and proposed regular gatherings where we could share our stories and devise strategies to confront Greg together. Each week, we would meet in someone's backyard, sharing snacks and support while tightening our bond. I made it a point to remind everyone how powerful we could be when united, transforming our individual grievances into a collective roar. 2. Documenting everything. I continued to gather evidence of Greg's behavior. I set up cameras strategically around our properties, capturing not just his outbursts but also Spike's incessant barking and the chaos that seemed to follow him wherever he went. I encouraged my neighbors to do the same, recording their own interactions with Greg and his dog. The more footage we collected, the stronger our case became. It was crucial to show that Greg wasn't just targeting us but was a nuisance to the entire neighborhood. 3. Public awareness. Next, I created a neighborhood newsletter, the kind that would normally highlight community events and families' accomplishments. However, I decided to leverage this platform to inform everyone about Greg's ongoing antics. I crafted a special column titled Neighborhood Watch, where I would share not only the genuine community news but also updates on our fight against Greg. I included snippets of our gathered video evidence, anecdotes from various neighbors, and encouraged others to join us at future meetings. The goal was to ensure that everyone knew he wasn't just a local nuisance but a serious problem that needed addressing. 4. Rallying for support. After establishing our community newsletter, I organized a neighborhood block party, an event designed to celebrate our unity while highlighting the need to stand against Greg. I invited everyone, emphasizing that it would be a chance for neighbors to connect, share stories, and voice their concerns. My goal was to create an atmosphere of solidarity that would put pressure on Greg and show him he could no longer operate without accountability. 5. Further heightening tensions. During the block party, I intended to have a few key speakers, people who had endured Greg's bullying firsthand. I encouraged them to share their stories openly in front of the group, amplifying the message that we wouldn't allow his behavior to go unchecked. I envisioned a moment when the collective voice of our community would echo in defiance against Greg, drowning out his taunts. I wanted him to realize that he was outnumbered and the tide had turned. 6. Writing a letter. After the block party, I wanted to take a more formal approach. With the backing of my neighbors, I planned to draft a letter addressed directly to Greg. In it, we would outline our collective grievances, the events leading up to this point, and the community's expectations moving forward. This letter would serve as an official warning, articulating that his actions had consequences, and if he continued down the path of harassment, we would be forced to elevate matters to local authorities. 7. Escalating to local authorities. Should Greg choose to respond with hostility or continue his behavior without consequence, my plan included enlisting the help of local law enforcement. With ample evidence of his verbal abuse, noise complaints regarding Spike, and our documented experiences, I would propose that we file a formal complaint against him. If necessary, we could even explore the avenue of a restraining order, demonstrating our commitment to protecting ourselves and our families from his aggression. 8. Public awareness campaign. I envisioned one final act that would make it impossible for Greg to escape the repercussions of his actions. I wanted to organize a small rally outside the city council building, inviting local media to cover our story. It would serve as a public demonstration of our solidarity and determination while shining a light on Greg's behavior. I could already picture the news reports, my fellow neighbors standing alongside me, united in our demand for respect and accountability. We would no longer be victims, we would be a force for change. 9. Personal face-off. As a final touch, I planned to have a personal confrontation with Greg. I envisioned a moment when he would feel completely isolated, standing alone as the neighborhood rallied behind me. I would approach him calmly, armed with evidence, and the day of the block party arrived, and the air buzzed with anticipation. I had never been more nervous in my life, but also fiercely determined. The community had rallied behind my vision, and we had transformed the backyard of one of the more outspoken neighbors into a lively gathering filled with food, laughter, and a sense of unity that had been missing for so long. Colorful banners flapped in the breeze, and the smell of grilled burgers mixed with the sweet scent of lemonade, creating an atmosphere brimming with positivity. But lurking underneath it all was the tension of knowing Greg would likely show up. He always did, eager to assert his dominance. I didn't want to think about how he'd react to the gathering or the fact that we'd all come together to stand against him. For weeks, I had rehearsed this confrontation in my head, preparing myself for the showdown that felt inevitable. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting soft golden rays over the party, I saw Greg approaching. He strutted over, his posture radiating arrogance, his bulldog Spike at his heels. The gleeful chatter faded momentarily as he stepped into our midst, a dark cloud on an otherwise clear day. My heart raced as I locked eyes with him, feeling the collective tension in the air. "Wow, what a pathetic gathering," he sneered, looking around at the laughing families and children playing. "Are you all really this desperate for attention?" "Sad." The crowd tensed, his words cutting through the light-hearted atmosphere like a knife. But I felt my resolve harden. I couldn't let him intimidate us. I stepped forward, taking a deep breath as I prepared to confront him. "Greg, this is about more than just a social gathering. It's about standing up against bullying," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "You've harassed my mom and made this neighborhood hostile for so many of us. We refuse to let you get away with it any longer." Laughter faded to silence, and I could feel the collective energy shift as my neighbors began to gather behind me. Greg's smug expression faltered slightly, and that made me bolder. "You think you can bully us into silence, but we're done being quiet," I continued, my voice rising with conviction. "We're here to show you that we're united, and we won't let you tear us apart anymore." Greg's eyes narrowed, and I could see the anger boiling within him. "You think you're all so clever, don't you?" He spat, stepping closer. "This little charade won't change anything. You're nothing but a bunch of losers crying for attention. You think you can take me down?" I swallowed hard but pressed on. "You underestimate the power of community, Greg. Together, we're stronger than you'll ever be." In that moment, I saw the shift in my neighbors. Heads nodded in solidarity, their expressions shifting from fear to empowerment as they stood with me. One neighbor, an elderly woman who had kept quiet for far too long, stepped up beside me. "We're tired of your behavior, Greg. It's time you realize that we won't tolerate your bullying any longer." The crowd began to murmur in agreement, emboldened by the shared sentiments of frustration. I could feel the energy rising, a unifying force pushing back against Greg. The tide was turning. Greg's demeanor darkened, and his bravado began to crack under the weight of our collective strength. "You think you can just come together and intimidate me?" he barked, looking around for support, but found none. "You all don't know what you're messing with." That's when I decided to leap into action. I produced the letter we had drafted together, filled with the collective experiences of my neighbors, along with the evidence we had gathered. "We're not just voicing our grievances, we're standing here letting you know we have documented everything you've done." With trembling hands, I held up the papers, the weight of countless stories of fear, anger, and hurt, translating into tangible proof of his reign of terror. I continued, "We're not afraid to take this to the authorities. You've crossed a line, and it ends here." For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in Greg's eyes, the bravado slipping from his grasp. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, trying to regain control of the conversation, but the energy around him was shifting. "We're not here to argue anymore," I declared, feeling the thrill of empowerment surging through me. "We're here to take our neighborhood back." The crowd erupted into applause, a wave of hope washing over us. The power of community was palpable, and suddenly Greg looking back, it's surreal to think about how that one confrontation changed everything. The energy at the block party was electric, the roar of our united voices drowned out Greg's attempts to regain control. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of hope, a belief that we could reclaim our neighborhood from his grasp. Greg's reaction was as explosive as I had feared. With the crowd against him, he sputtered a few more insults, but they fell flat in the face of our collective resolve. As he stormed off, I could see the realization dawning on his face: this wasn't just a petty brawl anymore, it was a full-blown revolt. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effect of that day became evident. Word of the block party and our united front spread throughout the neighborhood. My neighbors began coming together more than ever, hosting potlucks and gatherings, sharing laughter and stories we hadn't exchanged before. The sense of community that had been slowly eroding was being rebuilt, brick by brick, laughter by laughter. But Greg wasn't willing to take his defeat lying down. He retaliated, of course, attempting to vilify me and my family to anyone who would listen. He spread rumors, claiming that we were the real troublemakers, that our noise complaints were fabricated, and that we were trying to bully him out of his own home. I knew he thrived on chaos, and it was almost predictable how he'd act. Yet, with the support of my neighbors, it didn't matter as much as it once had. We organized a neighborhood watch, a simple yet effective means to keep an eye on each other and address any further tumult. I even reached out to the local police, who were surprisingly supportive after hearing our accounts. It felt liberating, knowing we had resources to back us up if needed. It wasn't long before they began patrolling the area more frequently, just a simple presence was enough to deter Greg from his antics. As time went on, the tension between us simmered down, but the scars from the ordeal remained. Greg would still glare at us from his porch, attempting to assert his dominance with nasty looks, but they no longer held any power. Each time I saw him scowling, I felt the thrill of victory surge through me. I was reminded that my actions had made a difference. The collective strength of our neighborhood had put an end to his reign of bullying. Then came the day of reckoning. We had invited the local news to cover our communal efforts to reclaim our neighborhood. I stood there, proud as I watched my neighbors recount their experiences and share stories of how we had come together. The piece aired just before the evening news, and what followed was a wave of support from others in the community who faced similar struggles. However, I never expected Greg's reaction. He came over that evening, furious as ever, demanding to know why we put him in such a negative light. It was surreal to see him so unhinged, so desperate. "You think this is over?" he spat, face red with rage. I stood my ground. "It was never about being over, Greg. It's about understanding that we won't let you bully us anymore. Your actions have consequences, and we're just getting started." With that, I turned my back on him, feeling the solidarity of my neighbors behind me. The sense of closure was palpable. For all his threats and bluster, he had lost the power he once wielded so effortlessly. Months passed, and slowly, Greg faded into the background of our neighborhood's dynamic. He still lived there, but his presence was muted. He learned the hard way that the community wouldn't tolerate his behavior any longer. It was during one of our neighborhood gatherings, where the laughter rang out like music, that it hit me: we had transformed. The community once splintered by fear was stronger than ever, forged in the fires of conflict. Yet, as I sat back, watching my mom laugh with neighbors she had never really talked to before, a deeper thought lingered in my mind. Revenge had given way to something more profound, a sense of belonging, unity, and understanding that comes only when we're willing to fight for each other. But at what cost? Did it change my relationship with Greg? Did it change me? I pondered the complexities of human nature and how revenge can ignite a fire, but it can also illuminate the path to healing. In reclaiming our neighborhood, I had also learned the true power of compassion and community support. As I gazed at the joy surrounding me, I realized that sometimes, it's not the act of revenge that defines our journey, but rather the lessons we learn along the way. I would forever treasure the strength of my neighbors, the resilience of my